Hello everyone and welcome back to PASSTHEauxCORD and streaming services. They've been part of the music industry for over a decade, and one of them is probably the primary way that you listen to music. They've certainly had their controversies in the past, but they've never been quite as controversial as they are in the big 2025. Most notably Spotify, who we've recently talked about the controversies of in this channel's earlier videos, but it's gotten to a point that even certain popular artists are leaving the platform behind and boycotting it entirely by pulling their music. And with Spotify's business practices and actions causing so much of an issue lately, a lot of people have decided to also join in solidarity and move to a different streaming platform. But that begs the question, which one do you choose? You don't want to move in somewhere and find out you don't like it once you've already signed the lease. Well, that's what we're here to find out today, because I went so far as to move into all of the streaming platforms entirely, try them out for a significant period of time, and I'm going to tell you which ones I think are the best. That way we can see which one is the best overall, but also certain factors will matter to you more than others more than likely, so you can rank them based on that as well. The standards for today, the first one is UI, which does include the literal UI, but also just how well the app functions in general, things like playback. And then the next one after that is features, which is where we'll talk about what standardized features it may either have or be lacking on, as well as individual specific special features that each one has. There's catalog, which is literally the diversity of music you can find on the platform. Then there's also payout and cost. Payout refers to how much the platform actually pays to the artist per stream, and cost refers to how much you, the user, will be paying to use the service. There's also a bonus section for slightly unrelated things where it can either go up or down 3 points, and that'll make more sense later. Also, to explain how I tested each platform, it goes as follows. Make an account, typically with a free trial, follow a large list of artists that I normally listen to, about 200 to 300, make a 100 song playlist, run that playlist through at least one time on shuffle, and then listen to a few albums. This lets me get a feel for the UI, how well everything works, how well the playback works, and also lets me see if the suggestions it ends up giving me are any good whatsoever. And side note, but this will be from a US and Windows as well as Android perspective. I don't have access to anything else, and universally those are the most common, at least for the people who are going to be watching this video in this audience. I should also pop back in here real quick and mention that everything in this video is taken from a perspective of fall 2025. All of these apps are subject to change, as is my opinion on them, and everything in this video is meant only to be taken as my opinion. That all said, let's talk about the biggest platform out there, Spotify. Similar to most, Spotify was the first streaming platform I ever used before switching to Apple Music earlier this decade, about 5 years back. For that reason, these are the only two platforms I didn't try out specifically for this video, but I've definitely had my fair share of experience. Moving into the first category, UI, you'll start to see some of why I switched. At the surface, it's pretty hard to deny that everything Spotify has to offer visually is clean, modern, and looks how you should expect it to. I'm noticing at a surface glance right away, there's things that are a little bit more overcrowded than they used to. That's mostly from them adding new features. Are those things necessary? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. I guess it's up to you. On your main page, you have things like radio stations, playlists, things you normally listen to. The order of it is a little bit confusing. Again, it's a bit cluttered as well, but for the most part, everything makes sense. The main thing I don't like is that the difference between made for you, radios, and your mixes is a little bit blurry. So is the difference between recommended for today and top picks for you. It kind of seems like they have a lot of ways of recommending music that gets overly specific or just not descriptive enough. Maybe that's just me, but again, it seems kind of convoluted. The search features, adding things to your library, adding things to your playlists is all very clean and very smooth, very seamless all around. It's the industry standard, and it's that way for a reason. So, at first glance, Spotify is pretty great, until it isn't. I was pretty constantly having playback issues, as well as just big crashes on Spotify when I used it, and that's part of why I ever started thinking about switching in the first place. It's definitely not everyone who uses the platform, but it's definitely not just me either. People continue to complain about this sort of thing to this day when using Spotify. It's to the point that the Spotify subreddit was censoring so many posts about this, deleting posts about glitches and issues that they actually actually had to make a separate Spotify subreddit called True Spotify to report on such things. The other main issue seems to be that the desktop app is relatively very hardware intensive and takes up a lot of resources on your computer. On a mid to low end PC, running Spotify along things like a somewhat intensive game will probably mean you're going to incur at least playback issues, if not crashes outright, and a lot of the other ones have figured this out, so I don't know why Spotify hasn't. That said, the issues there may be somewhat mitigated by using the web player instead of the actual desktop app, but the web player is a lot more clunky and less functional, so at the end of the day it doesn't really matter much. It's just take one or the other. Some users have also reported seeing sponsored content, including AI-generated music, posted onto their main feed, even on their paid subscription, which is obviously a problem, adds more clutter, and it's just kind of gross. All things considered, Spotify's UI is mostly quite well made, but I think it's okay to hold them to a higher standard when they are the biggest in this industry. Truly, it should be flawless. They have the resources for it. With how things are laid out, I'd lean pretty much towards a 4 out of 5 range, but with the issues, glitches, bugs that seem to be ongoing to this day, that lowers it a point, and I really can't forgive the AI sponsored content, or really just sponsored content in general on your main page on a paid subscription. So it's going to go down to a 2. Sound quality. Spotify's sound is not excellent, but it will be absolutely fine for most people. It's one of the things it's most criticized for, and that is warranted to some degree, but only to some degree. If you max the settings out, you're not going to be getting audiophile level quality, but it will absolutely fit the needs of most people. That said, if you're somebody who's into hi-fi audiophile type stuff, Spotify isn't going to cut it for you, or even if you just really want to precisely hear every detail in a song. It's fine for almost everybody though, 3 out of 5. Since I first filmed and scripted this video, Spotify's audio quality situation has changed, and they have rolled out what they've been saying they would roll out for quite some time in the form of lossless audio. Now, people much smarter than I am have gone through and actually tested this. It technically isn't as good as some of the competitors who also do lossless audio, such as Tidal. While it's here, it's not necessarily a lot better than what you had before, and I have also heard reports of it making the app run slower, taking up more storage space, things along that line. Later in the video, when I talk about Deezer, essentially think of it as the exact same thing. For that reason, even though it is technically higher sound quality now than it used to be, I won't be adding any additional points to it. In fact, it really kind of just seems like it's generating buzz and headlines in order to have some sort of positive press around them during a somewhat tumultuous time for the company. With Spotify being the industry standard, most of its features are what you'd think, what you're used to, and they work as well as you'd think. It probably has the most advanced social features of anything we've seen today. They very recently added DMs, which is a new thing. I don't know. It's there if you want it, I guess. It used to be there. They took it off. They added it back on. Not sure why, but social features are a thing. So if you're into that, Spotify has you covered. There's lots of radios. That much on the platform is pretty well figured out. And on the topic of radios, there's the AI DJ radio hosts that a lot of people seem to like and use very frequently. I think it's a little dystopian personally. Like, it's just not a real guy, but it's trying to be. It's weird to me, but if you like it, you like it. It has lyrics, typically synchronized ones. Apple Music was the only one that had that back when I switched, but I gotta give them some credit because they've entirely matched it now. It has collaborative playlists, which is a cool feature, but one thing I really like about Apple Music that you don't get on Spotify is just how easy it is to change your playlist cover. I can just use an image straight from wherever I'd like to on Apple Music, but here they make you go scrapbooking. Not really sure why that is. It's not that way on desktop, as it never was. They always let you change it from desktop. It used to be you had to on there, and there was nothing for mobile. Now it's just convoluted. I don't like it, and playlist covers are a thing that you're going to see matters to me a lot, but it is what it is. And as a nice added, there are a ton of playlists on Spotify. Most of that comes from the fact that they have an enormous user base, but it also just comes from the app itself making playlists. But it is a double-edged sword, because one of Spotify's biggest controversies is that they've somehow ended up with AI-generated music on their platform-generated playlists, such as the big controversy of the Velvet Sundown, which we've gone over on the channel as well. There has been instances of people not knowing that they're listening to AI music, starting to follow a band, and then being very disappointed that it's just not a real thing. Again, somewhat dystopian. Spotify has also been accused of allegedly doing what's essentially the modern version of payola as well. It's a nuanced and interesting discussion, and there's not great laws legislating this sort of thing, but again, allegedly, it's gone as far as Sabrina Carpenter's Espresso being found on things like sleep playlists. These things aren't going to be something that very commonly occurs or you're going to run into a lot, but when Spotify's biggest pluses include their great recommendations, it is something to keep in mind, because that much might not actually be that valuable to you when issues like this are coming up and seem to be growing in prevalence. Overall, though, I can't complain about Spotify's features too much. It has what you want for the most part. It has some extra things, and it seems like they constantly add new things as well. We'll lean towards a 4 out of 5 just to be generous, because it's going to have most of what you want. For the catalog, most platforms will be getting the standard 3 out of 5 middle of the road if most independent artists and individual record labels are going to be adding most of their music to it. Just anything commonly distributed to, where you'll see pretty much an equivalent 1-to-1 versus every other streaming service. Normally, and for years, that is most of what Spotify had readily available to you. But however, like I mentioned before, given their recent controversies, some artists have been leaving the platform, meaning that that catalog is technically dwindling, and I think this boycott is something that we're going to see only get worse before it gets better, so you might lose some of your favorites. Among the most popular bands that left are King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard and Shoo Shoo, which happen to be two of my favorites. I would have lost literally hundreds of songs from my playlists. And your favorite might not have left yet, but they very well could in the future, and that's just something to keep in mind. I'd say these gaps are easily remedied by local files, but Spotify's local file system isn't really all that great, because again, bugs can be a very bad thing on Spotify. I do really like and appreciate that they have it at all, because many of the platforms we're about to go over don't have it, but I ran into very commonly back when I used the service constantly that I would open up the app one day and a lot of my local file songs would just be gone. It's also a very convoluted process to add them in the first place. It kind of seems like they don't want you to, but sometimes I'll just go on there and they'll either be grayed out and won't be playable, or they just will not have ever existed in the first place as far as you know. It's very frustrating, so it's something where I can't give them a ton of props for that. I think it's gotten somewhat better over the years, however, I did some digging around and I see some people still having this issue. So for all of these things considered, I can really only give Spotify a 2 out of 5. You might be able to fill in the gaps easily, you might not, but some big artists are leaving. Payout is going to be a big one for Spotify, and it is the main reason that I ever left the platform. Almost no streaming services pay artists enough, or even close to a living wage. That's well known, but Spotify is actually the lowest among all of them, which is very odd considering their artists on their platform is literally all they have. It seems to vary a lot based on multiple factors, but it appears to be about $3 per 1,000 streams, with $2 being the bottom limit, sometimes up to $4 or $5, which still is not a lot, but would be significantly better, but that seems to be the outliers more than the standard. $3 is about the average you're looking at, but again, it can go even lower. The fact that they're paying artists that low lowers the industry standard. If Spotify paid out better, the other streaming services would then feel obligated to also do so and be pressured to do so. So, 0 out of 5. Easy one. It's exceptionally terrible. For cost, Spotify's cost for an individual is $11.99 per month, which is $1 more per month than it was just mere months ago. That's only $1 more than the average $10.99 and what was standard for a very long time, and you know, that dollar isn't going to get you very far, but we're going to soon find out that some options are better and you'll end up paying less for them, so you might as well take that dollar back. That all said, they do have discounted rates such as a family plan, duo plan, and student discount, so those are nice to see, as well as a lower fee per month if you pay annually. Most of those are the same for every platform, but the duo subscription is actually the only one that's harder to come by, and since they have that, I'll go ahead and give it a 3 out of 5. Alright, now time for the bonus round where we can add or subtract a few more points. On the positive end, Spotify has audiobooks and podcasts built right into the platform, which is pretty nice. Podcast integration only happens sometimes, and audiobooks are exceptionally rare, so that much is good. Plus 2 points there. Why not? But on the negative end, I have just as many issues. First is their general business practices. I don't want my subscription fee to go to funding things like AI, military tech, and most artists don't want that either, which is where the boycott is coming from. And I don't want to be on the platform that is one of the lowest paying out to artists. And they're a company where boycotting them could actually make a significant difference of some kind. Boycotting Apple or Amazon or Google with their streaming service of choice wouldn't really do you any good because those services are only a drop in the bucket of that company's overall profits. With Spotify, they've got one thing, and it is their streaming platform, so if it loses users, that's a much bigger significant blow to them. My second point against them is the constant AI integration. It is something that lowered the other factors a little bit, but the fact that they have the most AI on their platform and they are the biggest one, and AI generated music is causing so much damage to the music industry already right now, it's a big problem and it should be controlled, or at least attempted to be controlled to some extent. It's everywhere, and if anything, it is encouraged, so that balances us out at 0. Overall, said and done, Spotify's closing is at 14 points, which is heavily dragged down by the payout factor, but also it just isn't exceptional in some of those other regards. Spotify has most things that any average user will want, but there are other platforms for the same price that excel in so many other areas that you might as well use instead. Are you going to be fine on your day-to-day with Spotify as your main streaming service? Yes, of course, most people use it for a reason. There isn't a huge problem with actually using it, but we're gonna find out that some are just strictly better. Starting with the first, let's move to Apple Music. And here we are, everybody, my streaming service of choice for the past half decade or so. Don't worry, I'll still be ranking it just as fairly as everything else, and let's get into it with UI. Apple Music's home setup is pretty nice, it's very modern, it's very clean, everything seems right where it should be. I like that your recently played is always the first thing you see. It just seems nice that way. And then as you scroll down, they give you various suggestions, oftentimes rooted based on what you're recently listening to, and it'll be suggestions for specific artists, genres, albums, so on. Some curated playlists are available to you both based on topic and mood. Some things do get a little bit cluttered and inconsistent in the same way Spotify does, but for the most part, I have that issue nowhere near as much, and everything you really want to use is going to be grouped right at the top, so you don't do a lot of scrolling on the main page anyways, more oftentimes than not. The radio tab tends to have a lot of original content curated by Apple Music, such as interviews, podcasts, things of the like, as well as just actual radios. It's nice to have this, and it's nice to have it isolated here. You may or may not find it interesting. The library format I really like. I think it's very clean and organized, but I've also been using it for a long time, so take that for what you will. Menus, navigating, searches, things of the like, everything works how you'd expect it to. So yeah, mobile app, awesome, even on Android, and yes, it is available on Android. People get it mixed up and think that it isn't. Desktop app, however, not so much. That's gonna drag things down quite a bit. The UI itself is somewhat similar. It isn't terrible, it is pretty good all around in that regard. I think that it looks decent, but the crashes, much like Spotify, rough. That's likely because the Windows app, and again I'm using this from a Windows perspective, is relatively new. You used to just have to use the good old iTunes if you wanted to use Apple Music on your Windows PC. I've remedied this personally by using Cider, which is an external player for Apple Music. It just costs a couple of bucks and it's technically in beta right now, so it is a little bit janky sometimes, but I don't typically have any issues, and it also is nowhere near as intensive on my hardware. The mobile app drags it up hard, but the desktop app drags it down hard, so we're gonna go with a 3 out of 5. It would be a 5 if the desktop app didn't just like break everything. Important note to keep in mind though, once again, if you use Mac, this probably works awesome on there. One of the best reasons to switch to Apple Music is their somewhat superior audio quality. On its top settings, Apple Music has what will be practically indistinguishable from the very best we'll see today to the completely untrained ear. If you're an audiophile or someone who's using very high-end equipment, you might end up preferring the sound of some of the ones that we'll get to later on, but for literally almost everyone, this is going to sound great. Something that's a little bit more gimmicky, so I wasn't sure where to put it, was the spatial audio feature they have on certain songs and albums. It basically just gives a stronger stereo range, so things will be hitting in different spots in your headphones, or it'll be doing the same in your stereo if you're doing that. It can sometimes be cool. I kinda like it to some degree, but it's more of just a fun little gimmick than it is an actual sound quality difference. So with that as just a nice little fun extra thing, and with the audio quality already being strongly superior than most other platforms, we're gonna give it a 4 out of 5. For features, just like Spotify, Apple Music has pretty much anything that comes standard and you would expect to be on a streaming platform. They were the first to add lyrics again, so that works very well, and they even do have collaborative playlists as well. Some other social features which are kind of nice. I like these little icons that pop up to playlists and albums when someone you are friends with have listened to them. It also will show you just a list of things your friends are listening to sometimes, which can be nice. Helps build discussion if nothing else. One thing that can be cool is that they mark essential albums in an artist's discography. Sometimes these are straight up wrong if I'm being honest with you, but they're usually a great gateway into an artist. Detailed album bios can be sometimes interesting, but otherwise it's just there and easy to ignore if you don't want to see it. The added function of putting some music videos at the bottom of an artist's profile can be really cool. It's very rarely the entire catalog of an artist's music videos, but they end up putting some on there, and it's nice to see. It's nice to have it all conveniently organized there for you. Also, I said this before, but playlist covers are a huge thing for me, and they work so well on Apple Music. I truly appreciate it. All around, it has a few extra fun little things, and it doesn't have anything I'd ever take away from it. I think if you use Spotify right now, you're definitely not going to be disappointed with the features of Apple Music, so it's going to be a 4 out of 5. Nothing I really dislike. Apple Music's catalog is that aforementioned baseline where most distributors, most distributing platforms that an independent artist might use, and most labels are going to be putting all of their music onto Apple Music. There aren't going to be many gaps in your playlist, but if you are a fan of a band that only uses Bandcamp, for instance, it's pretty easy all around to add local files to Apple Music, and then once you do, they work significantly better than Spotify's. It's only available for desktop, and I think if you're a Windows or Linux user, it's going to be significantly harder than it would be on a Mac. Again, that desktop app doesn't really like to cooperate with us, but it's fairly intuitive and you'll get the hang of it. Just watch a tutorial or something, and then once you get those onto a playlist or into your library, they don't go anywhere. I have uploaded entire discographies of things that are not on Apple Music whatsoever. I'm talking thousands of songs, and it all stays right where I want it. There's a small added bonus, and that's that sometimes they run promotions where an artist will only drop to Apple Music as well. For a long time, Dr. Dre's The Chronic was only available on Apple Music, and wanting to listen to it is the first time I ever tried this platform and the reason I stuck around. And A$AP Rocky recently dropped a single that was also only available on Apple Music. For all of those reasons, Apple Music is going to be getting a 4 out of 5. We'll get better today, but just barely. If you put any amount of effort into it, you can get whatever you want on Apple Music. Apple Music's payout to artists isn't the all-time best by any means, but it is at least 2 times what what Spotify pays out on average at around $6.20 per 1,000 streams. It's not like a full living wage or anything, but still, if everyone switched over to Apple Music right now, artists would be making 2 times what they did before off of streaming. 3 out of 5 because I think that's worth it, and it does get better, but I think that's decently justified. It's a lot better. Cost for Apple Music is $10.99 for individuals, which is the same as Spotify before they recently raised it. $1 per month won't break the bank, but again, this is better just in general in almost every aspect, so why not take that dollar discount? You know, I mean, it's $12 a year. That's another subscription per month you can get if you really want. It offers a family plan, annual discount, and student discount, so those things are nice. No duos option though, unfortunately, so I can't give it that added plus. That one lacking thing bumps it down from a 5 down to a 4, but otherwise I like that they're still at the standard $10.99, and I think it's worth it. Bonus round here, I really wish that I could afford a little bit extra towards Apple Music. I really wish they had podcasts, but unfortunately Apple just has a separate app called Apple Podcasts, which is not even available on Android or Windows. But I will take away one point, and it's based on 2 half factors. Apple has had pretty big controversies as a company, and they are either worse than or equal to, I would say, what Spotify's are. But again, the difference is it simply doesn't matter if you boycott Apple Music. It is a drop in the bucket. If Apple Music got wiped off the face of the planet tomorrow, I think that just about nothing would end up changing for Apple. It would still be a extremely lucrative company, and it wouldn't do a lot of damage to them if they lose an Apple Music subscription. The other half point that I'll take away is that they've had small and relatively inconsequential run-ins with AI music being featured. It's nowhere near to the point with Spotify, but the fact that it's happened at all is pretty bad. Apple Music's final score is 21, quite a bit higher as we can already see. I think if most people switch to Apple Music, they'll just see some slight improvements from Spotify, possibly some solid benefits. If you're gonna switch anywhere and you want to make it quick and easy, Apple Music is quite possibly the best place to do it. It's what I did back in 2020, and I've never seen a reason to go back. It's the second popular for good reason. But now let's move on to YouTube Music. Apple Music and Spotify are really the big hitters in the music industry, but a close third at this point is likely YouTube Music, which in and of itself is essentially a growing offshoot from YouTube's premium subscription, once called YouTube Red, now called YouTube Premium. And that's something you might be using right now. But really in general, YouTube, long-standing in the industry, sort of is the streaming platform, even if it might not feel like it these days. The reason I say that is that on-demand songs were able to be played from YouTube since basically as long as I've existed. If you wanted to hear a song, you've been able to look it up on YouTube and play it for quite some time now, and in a way, that's essentially what a streaming service is. Let's take a close look at what that's turned into, and buckle in because I think I have the most to say about this platform of any we'll talk about today. One of the first things you're gonna notice about YouTube Music is way too hot for this. One of the first things you're going to notice about YouTube Music straight out the gate is that the UI is still solid, but significantly more disorienting than the last 2 we've gone over, especially as the case with Apple Music. When you first start out, as far as recommendations go, it's pretty bare, but then you do have this speed dial option, which is things you've recently played. I think it's conveniently placed. That fills up very quickly, and then you start to get more suggestions as you listen to more music. I love that the next thing under it when I first booted up the app was community-made playlists, but we'll get into that more later. From there, it's a curated list of things like artists, albums, and playlists, oftentimes based on genre, so on and so forth. You then have tabs on the bottom, which are pretty simple, less detailed. We'll get to the samples tab later, just kind of remember that it's there, but the explore tab is very nice. It's essentially a more advanced search. Lets you get into very specific genres, lets you see what's trending, things like that. Library is as clean as you'd expect, and once you're used to it, building a playlist is super smooth. The player works nicely too. Things are laid out a little bit differently than you'd expect though. All of your options from downloading the song to seeing what's recommended are available right on the player itself, which is very interesting. It's a bit chaotic again, so it's kind of a blessing and a curse, but I'm sure once you're used to this, it'll work nicely and you'll not have any real problems with it. In my many hours of actually testing it out, I wasn't wasn't expecting this, but I never had any playback issues, which is pretty impressive since you're often jumping from actual songs to YouTube videos that are the version of songs converted over. Sometimes that'll be on the same playlist. It never dislikes it. Everything works very well. It'll keep playing no matter what. And we'll talk more about that video integration again later once again. Negatives, there are a few. One is this odd slant towards censorship in a way. When I looked for the band Meth, this popped up, which is more of a funny quirk than anything. But what's a lot more hindering is what happens if you look up a song title that has an explicit word in it somewhere. The bigger downfall is that if a song's music video or the song itself is explicit enough, at least the first time you play it, I'm not sure if this can be recreated, it will ask you if it's okay to play because it has adult content. That's not anywhere else. There's not really a reason for that to exist. And an even bigger downfall yet is that it often seems to show you clean versions of songs before the actual song itself, because I completely unintentionally added clean songs to my playlist. Kinda bad. If you end up with that, it's just annoying if you're used to the regular song. It's just strictly worse. My only other issue is the way that things kind of mesh with the regular YouTube app. You will see fake artists sometimes, or sometimes an artist won't be listed correctly and you won't see all of their songs until looking for the videos of them. On the side of a desktop app, oddly there really isn't one. YouTube Music runs exclusively native to your browser, which means you might run into some clunky loading times, but there's far more ups than downs. For one, any browser extensions you're used to using and any settings of your browser in general can be used on YouTube Music because of this, and it also means it'll have a very minimal impact on your hardware, relatively speaking, to any of the main ones. I had a lot of luck running it alongside editing. Gaming would also probably work the same way. It's just one of the most lightweight platforms for listening to music in general, and that's very appreciated. There's a lot of good and some bad with YouTube Music's UI in general, but I think it's mostly good, so 3 out of 5. Sadly, sound quality is the biggest Achilles heel for YouTube Music, and it is going to be the reason that some people don't want to use it. Hi-fi is not an applicable thing here whatsoever, and your results may vary otherwise. Even when boosted to its highest settings, the untrained ear will catch some sorts of discrepancies. Even on minimal hardware and things like car speakers, you might notice things sounding a bit off. It does get worse than this, and part of that is just because of the YouTube integration in general. We're gonna go 2 out of 5 on it. The features section is wild compared to most of the apps. The biggest thing is that YouTube itself ties into YouTube Music, as we've mentioned a few times now. This means you can pop back and forth between a song and its video counterpart, which I think is kind of cool. You can also see likes, comments, recommended things all right on the player itself, next to the downloads and things like that as well. There's a ton going on this player, but I think it's kind of cool to have it all there once you're actually used to it. It does surprisingly come with the ever-growing standard of lyrics, synchronized ones as well, and I didn't run into too many tracks being missing it. I figured this wouldn't be a thing given the nature of YouTube, but they have it here and it's pretty well integrated. Growing on that YouTube community aspect, I like that they push user-created playlists a lot. I'm getting whatever the hell Cigarette Trees is recommended to me. It's cool, it's crazy, I love it. The other YouTube integration factor that is really nice is that anything you subscribe to on the main YouTube app will be also subscribed on the YouTube Music app, so long as you have the same Google account attached to both. Maybe this is a given, but again, if you've just been listening to certain artists on the regular YouTube app over the years, you'll already have them right here ready to go in your library. This also does mean that some of your suggestions will be better just because it already knows a little bit of what you like from the algorithm. And the final and super odd and quirky feature that YouTube Music has is the ability to doom scroll music. Yes, there is a short form compatible version to go through and scroll through music videos, mostly just songs in general. It works just like any TikTok or anything like that would go, and upon first glance I kind of hated this because I generally generally don't like short form content invading all other platforms. It seems like it's on every app these days. But then upon thinking about it, this is kind of cool because it is a healthier alternative to some degree to things like TikTok. You're not going to be seeing a bunch of rage bait. It's more along the lines of just cool artists you might not have heard of, or some of your favorite artists' music videos. It's kind of a nice thing to have, and it could be a really good way to discover music. Finding music is actually, I would say, the very best on YouTube Music out of any platform. Cool stuff gets pushed to me. I've actually gotten some new artists I like off of my time using YouTube Music. Sadly, collaborative playlists aren't a thing here, but playlist covers certainly are, and they are very easy to use no matter what platform you're on. Very nice. But really, social features in general are entirely missing, and that's kind of a shame, but most people aren't truly going to notice that much or care. All things considered, there's possibly a few things missing, but I think it's made up for with unique and original things. Again, it's a little bit hard to predict exactly what's going on with YouTube Music, but I think it's positive as a whole. We'll do 4 out of 5 on it. In opposition to sound, catalog is actually where YouTube excels above most everything. There is nowhere I can get a song like Hydrocodones by Black Cray, for example, without using local files because it just simply isn't on streaming. But the thing is, it's been uploaded as a YouTube video before, so I can just search up that YouTube video, end up with it, put it on my playlist like I would anything else, and it's all good to go. You very likely ran into it before where a song you want to listen to will not be on streaming platforms but will be on YouTube. Well, guess what? You're already on YouTube, so it's gonna be here. This platform more or less has every song, and if it doesn't, if you find something missing, you could always just go and upload it yourself. I would say copyright claims could be a problem, but realistically, if it's not on streaming and it's not already posted here, it's probably niche enough to where you don't have to worry about it, and even then, I'm pretty sure you can set it to private and just keep it in your library regularly. For payout, in an odd turn of events, YouTube Music is just as chaotic on this standard as it is on everything else. It is either one of the highest paying or one of the lowest paying, and it all depends on just like circumstances, basically. If you're just streaming tracks like normal, it seems to be on the lower end, well within it, with about $4.80 averaging as the general payout. But again, that YouTube integration kind of flips it all on its head. As you probably know from other creators talking about it, YouTube monetization is a finicky thing. It can either be very lucrative or not at all, but you are probably adding to that by using YouTube Music, at the very least when you're using the video equivalent to songs. I'm not sure exactly how this converts over, but if you're using YouTube Music, you have YouTube Premium already, and with videos, people get more of a payout in monetization from people watching their videos with YouTube Premium than they actually do from ad revenue. Might be putting more money in the pockets of creators if you're actually using the video equivalents, and that ends up being a factor. I also know anecdotally, just from some people I've talked to, YouTube Music does end up paying out pretty good at times. This was a long time back, but I knew someone who got about 25 to 35 thereabouts from YouTube Music when they hadn't gotten any payout from any other streaming platform yet, and it was just off of a few thousand views, so nothing crazy. So again, based on the information I have, it's either one of the highest or lowest paying. We'll go right down the middle and say 3 out of 5, one way or the other. Cost is another area where YouTube Music excels way above many of its competitors in multiple different ways. You get a double benefit with this platform, and that is having YouTube Premium and YouTube Music at the same time. They are not a separate subscription, they go hand in hand, so if you want one, you can just have the other for free. You're probably someone who also streams music and watches YouTube videos since you're here, and if that's the case, then you can just get both at their better version at only $10.99 a month, which is again the previous standard before Spotify raised it by $1, so it's again on the cheaper end, even if we don't consider that double subscription. There is also a family plan, student discount, and annual plan discount, so those are nice to have. Again, this is easily the most cost-effective of any that we're going to go over in this video, especially for anyone who's probably watching this video, so it's a 5 out of 5, very easy. Bonus round, negative end, same rant I had about Apple, but now to an even higher yet extent. There is no boycotting Google, I'm sorry, it just very well will not happen. So many things are Google products, and again, if YouTube YouTube Music just went straight out the window tomorrow, I don't think Google's stock price would even change. If you do anything ever, you're not really going to boycott Google, so like, is it awesome that you're giving them money? Not really, but does it make any difference? Also no. In the long run, boycotting a Google product, especially YouTube Music in particular, isn't going to do anything for you. Or anyone, I guess, just at a large, as a general thing. But on the positive end, that seamless YouTube integration that I've mentioned multiple times now is great. As someone whose main two forms of entertainment are streaming music and watching YouTube videos, it's a great combination, and I love that they're both tied together. Easy +1 there, and my next +1 goes to how well the recommendations work on here. You can get new stuff, trending stuff, all updated very effectively, but most of all, you can find some weird niche underground stuff. It'll get pushed to you, and you can find this stuff you never would have found it otherwise. I actually have that happen on the main YouTube app sometimes too. I've found some very niche, cool, weird things just scrolling on YouTube, and it works the same on YouTube Music. You get all kinds of suggestions, and they all end up being pretty unique. Easy +1 there, but then the final +1 will actually go to podcast integration and it having the best podcast integration of any of the streaming platforms. Previously, I had Spotify still installed on my phone in order to run podcasts because Apple Podcast wasn't a thing. Turns out this was here waiting for me the whole time. So yeah, it works great. I've used it multiple times for multiple episodes of podcasts, and also, like, anybody who's just on YouTube for a podcast will then be converted over. It's great. It's fantastic for podcast use, so this is all 3 bonus points. It's the only one that's going to do that, I do believe, so yeah. Great to see it. Legendary. Overall, if you aren't a nerd about sound quality like myself, and more so like many other people who get even more into that, then I would absolutely recommend YouTube Music. If you are one of those people, the sound quality issues are just not going to be an option for you. But this is a haven and a treasure trove for anyone who's into music more casually and wants to get into more music, as in selection and diversity and variety. The recommendations on here are great. The way the app runs is pretty cool as well. It's a bit overstimulating and chaotic, again, if you're coming from something like Spotify, but once you get used to how everything works, I really think that it's one of the most smooth and seamless to use and most satisfying all around. Sadly, there's not a lot they can do about that sound quality issue. It'd be super nice if they did in the future, because otherwise I don't really have a great reason to still be paying for Apple Music if that was the case. But since YouTube is built right into YouTube Music, it probably simply won't happen. So again, I wouldn't recommend it to someone like myself, but I would recommend it to any casual listener. I came in with preconceived notions that I would hate this due to the sound quality, but turns out I really love just about everything else about it. It comes in at 25 points, which is astronomically high. So much could change with this app in the near future, and my entire opinion could 180 on it in a very short amount of time, really, because they were beta testing some new features, and a lot of it seems very AI-centric, very AI-based. It seems like they're heading down that direction if we are to take what is in the works, and if any of that really comes to full fruition, then this app could be way worse than it is right now, and I would be more heavily criticizing it. For now, however, that doesn't appear to be the case. Kind of seems like we're in the clear for now, so just make sure that if you're going to swap over to YouTube Music, you do a very recent scan of it if this video is old at all to you. Now let's move on to the last of the big mainstream ones that we'll talk about today. Amazon Music is the last one for this video that's owned by a big corporation, but it's also the least used by far widely, and you've probably heard of it, you probably know it's a thing, but you probably haven't actually taken the dive and used it before. If you've ever wondered about it, now's your lucky day, because we're going to rank how it actually stacks up against the other ones, starting with UI. I'd heard that Amazon Music's UI was pretty terrible compared to the rest, so I went in expecting to hate this, and really, yeah, they were right. This shit sucks. Upon first making your account and booting the app up, you're met with one of these things to add some artists or albums or whatever to your library. I typically tried to skip them for the purposes of this video, so I did. and I think it just broke everything right out the gate. Literally the first time I tried to play music, it kept hitting me with, this song is no longer available, and I really thought that maybe all of these songs actually were taken off of the platform. I was just getting unlucky with my selections. But no, turns out they were all there all along. All I had to do was completely uninstall the app and reinstall it. Now it worked. I don't know why, and it's very odd that the very first time that I opened up this product, it did not work at all, but that kind of just tells you what you need to know as well. It's setting the standard. But after that, I didn't have a lot of playback issues. It would pause sometimes when I didn't really want it to, or it wouldn't autoplay when it really should. I didn't have problems otherwise. I didn't have it glitching out on me or anything too much, but some people have reported that they do have playback issues. But the only other bug type issue that I ran into is that artists I follow on mobile just refuse to show up on desktop for whatever reason. The only ones I can get to show up on desktop are actually artists I've bought music from on Amazon in the past with the same account. I've gone on there, bought CDs and vinyl from just a couple of people. Those show up. Nobody else does that I've manually went and followed. Beyond that, upon actually getting the thing to work, I'm just met constantly with like, you are the first things it's recommending me Tears for Fears AI cover garbage and The Weeknd's Worst album from like 8 years ago. The other thing you'll notice right away is that podcasts are almost more prominent on your homepage than music itself is, and that doesn't really seem to change much no matter how much you do or don't use the podcasts. I had them kinda go away, but not really. Your Find tab is just a search, but instantly you're seeing AI getting thrown at you already. We'll talk more about this later. But similarly, there's this Alexa tab all the way on the side. You can't get rid of this, but I don't want the permissions. I don't want what it adds to the app. I don't want anything to do with it, but I can't get rid of it. It's just there, and you'll hit it all the time and see the same pop-up and whatever. It's not very useful, though. The library tab is nowhere near as clean or smooth or nice looking as something like Apple Music, for example, but it's acceptable. But actually adding things to that library is where the real fun begins. See, upon making a playlist, I have to tell it that I don't want it to be AI, and then I have to deal with one of the least functional searches of anything I've used. Typos will totally get you the wrong thing. Sometimes audiobooks come up before songs do. Oftentimes the autofill will know what I want, but it just won't actually make it pop up to where I can play it or add it to something. I have to fully search for it, which normally wouldn't be that big of an issue, but the loading and buffering times on Amazon Music take forever when searching things. Relatively speaking, it just kind of feels like I'm in 2010 again, and the desktop app is most of the same. It's all just so primitive, so clunky, it doesn't work right, it doesn't look like something new. If you're used to an older player, it's very possible that Amazon Music will work just fine for you, but if you're coming from something much more modern, much more mainstream like Apple Music or Spotify, you're instantly going to notice a lot of things wrong with it. You're probably not going to like the UI of this app, and also Amazon has no excuse to not have one of the best ones. This is a billion-dollar company. I'm pretty sure they could afford the extra money to go ahead and hire a whole team to make this app on par with something like Spotify, or at least close to it. But instead, we're dealing with something way old at this point. Sound quality. Alright, roast session over for now because Amazon sound quality is actually one of the best. You can sometimes get the very best of the best quality when it comes to playing music on Amazon Music. You do have to turn a setting on to get the full power out of it. I once just had this entirely turn off for no reason, but that's not a very common issue, nor did it recur for me. It supports Dolby Atmos, which is kind of an entirely different can of worms, but it's generally good, and as is their Ultra HD and HD options. And those are otherwise what you get, and which options you end up getting kind of just varies based on popularity, but I'm also surprised at what things end up being missing from platform to platform, because we'll go on to see that not everything ends up being at the highest quality standards across all platforms. Some of them are only on one. Oftentimes it just doesn't really cross over. But if you're mostly listening to very popular music, you're gonna have a great time with the sound quality on Amazon Music. If you're the type of deranged freak that only tests out audio equipment with Hacker by Death Grips, like myself, you're going to have a less good time, but it's still going to be a good time because the audio still sounds alright, even if it's only on HD. But objectively speaking, there technically isn't one better than Amazon Music, although some are on the same tier as far as sound quality goes, so it'll get a 5 out of 5. Features, alright, right back into the roast session now. Amazon's features are also a good decade behind the times. It has lyrics, but it's the most ugly out of any of them we've seen today. It's not really synced up right, doesn't really have the whole karaoke thing going on, hardly legible, and it also has the lowest selection of lyrics per songs out of anything we've seen today. Most of its unique features come down to the AI and Alexa stuff, which just strictly isn't good, if anything, as far as I'm concerned. You have radios, but very limited options when it comes to curated playlists. They show community-made playlists just like they do on YouTube Music, but here it kind of more feels like it's to supplement the loss of app-curated playlists and lack of suggestions they give you in general, because it's kind of slim as far as what they offer in that regard. What you usually end up finding is just a more simplified and watered-down version of your taste. Big pet peeve of mine is that there are no playlist covers anywhere. You're just stuck with the good old Foursquare, like it or not, any platform. No collaborative playlist feature, no social features in general. Even the artist pages themselves are kind of shitty. You see releases first, which includes singles, EPs, albums, etc., but not like an albums tab or anything like that. The one unique feature that I do really like from Amazon is that when scrolling down on an artist page or off of the track list on an album, you can often see physical versions that are offered from Amazon. This isn't just good for people who collect music, but it's also great for supporting the artists themselves. Even then though, I'm sure Amazon is just trying to make a buck here because they're going to take their cut as they do with anything else. And beyond that, Bandcamp does this same thing entirely, but they kind of do it better. It's more of a storefront over there. And also, why not just go to the artist's actual merch page? I like this kind of reminder that you can buy merch from them, but effectively, you should just go somewhere else to do it anyways. Yeah, I can't afford more than a 1 out of 5 on this, and honestly, the option to buy physical versions is the only thing saving it from a 0, because again, huge billion-dollar company, make a better app. Catalog, here's another thing Amazon Music absolutely sucks at. So here you do get most of what we've been calling the standard selection, anything put on streaming by artists and labels commonly. But your results may vary as far as that goes. I didn't really find a ton missing, but this is a less prominent streaming service than the previous 3 we mentioned, so you're much more likely on here to run into something missing than on there, outside of the artists that have exclusively intentionally left Spotify. I did run into Ghost Mountain just being missing entirely. That's the only niche example that applies to me, but many things that are more niche might be missing. And again, that happens across many platforms, but the big issue here is that in no way is user-submitted content a thing, and in no way are local files a thing. I thought this would have the best local files option of everything, because I used to actually just use this app as an MP3 player way back in the day, but apparently somewhere around 2020 they just stopped letting you even do that. No idea why. Why would you take such a good feature away? I have no idea. It doesn't really make any sense, but nonetheless, that is the way that it is, and it is terrible. For most, you will find what you're looking for, and you could probably just go over to YouTube for the few things that you aren't finding, but that's inconvenient and a hassle, and you then can't put those things on your playlist, so it kind of sucks. It's not the worst we're going to see, though, so it'll get a 2 out of 5 here. Payout to artists, much like sound quality, is actually exceptionally good on Amazon Music in one of the areas in which it excels. They pay out roughly and on average about $8.80 per 1,000 streams, which is about double of what YouTube Music was doing, and almost 3 times what Spotify was doing, even on their higher ends. Now, would this change if Amazon Music was a bigger platform and they had to pay out to actual more artists for more streams? Quite possibly. But for now, it's a huge plus. And I already mentioned this, but having a well-integrated merch tab where you can buy physical versions is super nice. I think it's a great thing to see. I can appreciate that it might end up giving artists a little bit more of a payout, even if Amazon is taking their cut. It's technically the second best payout we'll see all day, and when you're that close to the top, I gotta give you the full 5. Cost is a tricky one with Amazon Music because if you're entirely new to the platform, it is $11.99, matching Spotify. But when we consider the app's actual functionality, that gets significantly worse. But then, like with YouTube Music, you do actually get an advantage if you already have Amazon Prime, which again, many of you probably do. And for free with your subscription, you do get a more limited version of the app. From what I understand, you can pick any song immediately, and you can make your own playlist, but you have to shuffle artists and albums, and then you get a limited amount of skips, which make it a total no-go for me and probably most thinking of switching. But if you don't want to pay for something else at all and you already have Amazon Prime, it's there as technically an option for you. But unfortunately with this, you don't even get that top sound quality, which as we've discussed is one of the only advantages with Amazon Music as well. And if you want the full experience, the only benefit you get from Prime is a measly $1 a month discount, which if we're being real, totally should have been the original price, if not lower. But beyond the Prime discount, it has a student discount, a annual subscription discount, and a family plan. So if you're interested in those things, it can also be good. It's not the worst option price-wise, especially if you already have Prime, but it's pretty bad, especially since you're paying for less. So I gotta give it a 2 out of 5 in this category. Bonus points, I'll be super generous and give 1 for the audiobook and podcast integration, just in case you're interested in those. It is one of the more limited ones in those regards, but it's there if you want it. But the AI integration all over the app is super sticky and makes me take that point right back off. I'm tempted to remove a point because Amazon is a easy company to boycott, relatively speaking, and their business practices are not great. They've had quite a few controversies. But again, this is only a tiny drop in the bucket for Amazon's overall profits. Boycotting it won't change a lot in the world like it would with Spotify. So again, I'm not that concerned about it. So all around, we're leveling out at 0 points, even though maybe 1 point taken off would be warranted. Overall, everything considered with Amazon Music, it's not useful at all compared to the others, except for very niche cases. But even in those niche cases, we'll soon get to things that work better. The UI alone makes me not at all feel the urge to hop over, but the lacking features really seal the deal there. Going into this, I knew that Amazon Music had high artist payout and great sound quality, so I expected to give it a glowing review. Sadly, this could be boosted to a very high level if they actually put some significant development into it, but since they haven't, it lacks behind the others. It's clocking in at only 15 points, so if you're on Spotify right now, there's not really a good reason to hop over to it. If you care about UI, functionality, things like that, Apple Music is better, as well as sound quality. But if you care about certain features, selection, and discovery, then YouTube Music is better. This is easily the worst of what I'd call the mainstream options, and I expected it to be the first or second best, so it's just kind of a letdown. But now we're gonna move on to something ever so slightly more niche, and that's Tidal. Of the streaming apps that are a little bit less mainstream and a little bit more niche, Tidal has proven to be one of the most popular, if not the most popular of the bunch, so it seems like a good starting point. It burst onto the scene with its main claim to fame being superior sound quality, which we will talk about soon. Tidal is the last of the services for this video that I had actually used at some point in the past before doing the research for this video, but it wasn't extensively, it wasn't for very long, so I was curious to see how it may have improved or changed in general since the last time that I used it. Let's get right into it with UI. Somehow back to back, I had issues upon the very first time I booted up the app. Tidal has a very limited free version that doesn't have so much as a search function, and oddly, it doesn't ask you to subscribe right now when you make an account for some reason, or at least the time that I tried it for this video. It just kind of kicks you straight onto that version without asking you any questions when you make an account through the app. So what I had to do is actually go out of my way to go to the browser site and subscribe to Tidal manually that way, which isn't that big of a deal, but it's very odd that I had to do it. And I mostly just tell you in case the same thing happens to you if you sign up for it. Because once you get over that hurdle, it is is a very nice UI that works fantastically. Looking at the mobile app, it's noticeably not cluttered. There are various suggestions and things of the like as you scroll down, but not a whole lot else going on here. There are the self-explanatory library and search tabs, but there's also this upload tab, and it's a little bit odd that it's right front and center because all this is for is uploading your own music that you actually made to the platform, as well as a little bit of a file sharing type of thing. With those being the only intended uses for it, it seems odd that it's right in the middle of everything. It kind of seems like it's rather niche. It's odd that it's here, not that big of a deal, just something I noticed. But upon actually building a playlist and adding artists to my library, everything worked so refreshingly smooth after dealing with Amazon Music. It always pretty much knows what I want, and it always adds pretty smoothly. I also like how suggestions are sometimes arranged on the search tab itself. Going through decades of music or looking for only clean music seems like it could be pretty useful. The player itself is also one of the cleanest and nicest looking we've talked about so far, if not the best. I really like how it looks. I like the bar being used to scroll through the song. It's just nice. It has a premium feel. And all the same can be said about Tidal's desktop app. I like the Cider player for Apple Music almost as much, but that is an additional product. It doesn't come with Apple Music. And even then, I think Tidal's a bit better since that one can be kind of janky with some crashes and glitches. As for any of the apps themselves in actual functionality that come with the app, I think that Tidal has the best desktop app. Everything is again very clean and responsive. Building playlists is a breeze. The only big problems with Tidal's UI and functionality traditionally are complaints of there being playback issues. This has been a thing for quite some time and has stopped a lot of people from converting over. When I tried it a few years back for the first time, I noticed some of this, and it's why I never even considered fully switching over there. Otherwise, I very well may have. But now when I try the app out, I don't really notice any playback issues. It seems like a lot of these problems were complained about enough that they're either greatly improved or fixed now. The only area in which I think that it still occurs quite a bit is if you have spotty or slow internet connection. I think Tidal just doesn't preload as much music as a lot of the major streaming apps do. So what that means is if you start losing connection or get too slow of connection for just even a few seconds, it will probably cut you off. The other ongoing playback complaints that I've read seem to be related to very specific hardware, so if that's not something that you're using, it won't be a big issue. Probably not something you're going to run into whatsoever. Overall, I think some minor issues, bugs, glitches, things like that exist to the point where I can't give it the full 5 out of 5, but it does have such a nice feel overall that I want to. We will go with a 4 out of 5 on it though. For sound quality, as I already mentioned, Tidal's main selling point is that it does have higher sound quality than its competitors. Audiophiles typically have one of two streaming apps that they swear by. It is usually either this one or Amazon Music. Sometimes you see Qobuz or Apple Music in the mix as well, but usually just the two. And just as you'd expect, Tidal is alongside Amazon Music as one of the best easily. I mentioned this on Amazon Music, but it is the same way here where certain selections of songs will not be available in the higher quality audio, so it will vary based on what song you're playing. Popular stuff will much more often have a higher quality option. Anything really obscure probably does not have the Dolby Atmos or Ultra HD selections. Instead, it will just say HD and give you the best of what it can, basically. And it is very odd how many things are Ultra HD on either one platform or the other, but not both. A quick thing I thought was worth mentioning is that if you connect a Bluetooth device to the device that you're playing Tidal through, it will tell you that audio is compressed through Bluetooth and it will just give you max, is what it says for the quality level. Now that is true. Bluetooth audio is compressed. That is the nature of it. It is objectively worse than wired audio connections, especially if there's an amp involved. But what's odd is that it seems like it might actually have worse Bluetooth audio than some of the other competitors. If you want to know where I noticed it play I Know the End by Phoebe Bridgers on Apple Music and on here. Just side by side, there's something I ended up noticing that sounds better on Apple Music, at least to my ears. I feel like Apple Music has better Bluetooth audio, and so does Qobuz, which we'll get to later. That is all just anecdotal. That is just what my ears are hearing when I try it out with Bluetooth. I'm not smart enough to know the actual logistics of it, and people have done a lot of tests as far as running Tidal and seeing what the lossless audio looks like. But as a whole, Tidal's audio is good enough that it is worth hopping over here just for the higher quality audio. It is lossless properly. It is good enough through a wired connection that I have considered getting a Tidal subscription additionally next to my Apple Music subscription just to hear a little bit higher fidelity. Once you're on a song with the Ultra HD available, you can't actually get much higher audio quality anywhere else. And again, the Bluetooth thing is pretty anecdotal and I don't have a good way of testing that, nor would I know what I'm doing. So I will not dock any points for it and still give this the perfect 5 out of 5. For features, much like its high quality UI, everything you're used to will either work just as good or better for the most part on Tidal. I already mentioned the player being quite nice. It is very nicely organized. The lyrics function pretty solid, and it's also nice being able to see credits. All of these things are placed right where I would want them. And I love that there's a nicely placed suggested songs section, just like what YouTube had. It also has playlist covers on mobile and on desktop, which gets a lot of brownie points from me. Music suggestions on Tidal, however, seem to be a little bit mid. I would say that it's a little better than what I was getting out of Amazon Music, but it's not anywhere near as good as some of the other ones we've been over. It does just kind of feed me a lot of stuff that I've heard before that is very obvious recommendations, if that makes sense. They do have some platform curated playlists in the mix, but they're usually quite short, and again, they're pretty obvious picks a lot of the time. User created playlists do pop up sometimes though, and that is very nice to see. In my case, the first one I saw was called Felonies, and the second one I saw was called Skullfuck Soundtrack. Whether that says more about Tidal or more about me, I am not sure, but it's kinda awesome. But the place where you can get some slightly more obscure suggestions is from the Upload Spotlight, where you can see the top played songs from what other users have uploaded to the platform using that upload feature that we talked a little bit about. And that leads us back into talking about that somewhat special feature. Think of it essentially like uploading a video to YouTube, but it doesn't really get pushed into an algorithm in the same type of way. You can essentially pick any audio file, give it a title, and then it'll be available to you and anyone you share the link with. Normally, if you're a musician and you have the resources to do so, it would still be better to put your music on Tidal through an actual distributor, because that way you can get streaming royalties from it and it will more likely be pushed. But it's cool that this is on here and it's free and it's easy. If you are an independent creator that wants the quick and easy, very much so free route of uploading your music onto somewhere, this is one way to get it done. The only really quirky and unique other feature that Tidal has is live streaming your music listening. All you gotta do is hit this live button on the player, copy the link, and then anyone you share this link with can listen to music at the same time as you. There's also this listen live section, which shows a bunch of just random streams. It's just what random people are listening to right at any given time. Now, I'm not sure how many people would ever get any use out of this, but I can see some of the utility in it. My only issue with it is that I just can't really get it to work well. I tuned into several of those random ones that were just popping up. It was always very choppy, it was skipping around, and it just seemed like the app couldn't keep up with what was being streamed. I don't know if this would generally happen if you're maybe closer to the person or maybe if you directly share the link, because I don't know anyone to try it out with that uses Tidal. If it does work better in that context, that's probably the context in which you would be using it anyway, so that you could listen to music with your friends at the same time. But in general, it's a feature that's kind of cool if you can get it to work right, and even then, I don't really see a lot of people using it very much. There's one more unique feature that comes with Tidal, but it is on a separate subscription, so we'll talk about it a bit later on. All things considered though, Tidal has most of the things that you need and want very well, very polished, and then it even has a few extra things, so we're gonna go 4 out of 5 on it. I don't think everything's absolutely perfect. again like the UI, but it might as well be. Tidal's catalog is better than the one that we just got done talking about for sure, but sadly, not perfect. You do get a full range of what we've been essentially referring to as the standard selection, and in my case that covered pretty damn much everything that I ever listened to outside of things that aren't uploaded to any streaming platforms. At varying levels of popularity from all the way at the bottom to all the way at the top, the only thing I ended up actually noticing is that some of Bones's older works are not available on Tidal for whatever reason. So then my only problem is that much like Amazon Music, you cannot remedy missing gaps in your library with local files because there is no local files option. And strangely, just like Amazon Music, it appears that used to be available and just now no longer is for no reason. With Amazon Music, it seems like it's just a feature that's now gone, but with Tidal, I can actually understand to some degree why they removed it, or at least theorize, and that has to do with the upload function that we've talked about a little bit a few times now. And I'm not really sure how much you're supposed to be using this upload function to remedy the gaps in your library, but it has been working for me so far. So just like you would expect on YouTube, when you upload something with copyrighted audio, it will probably get claimed as such, and there will be a good chance that you can't publicly post them nor share them. However, most songs that are missing from an artist's streaming profile probably won't get copyright claimed anyways, and even when it seems to be the case that it will, it doesn't seem to actually cause an issue for you, the actual individual, listening to them. To test it, I uploaded a Black Cray song that was not on streaming and a Charlie XCX song that was. I don't have the Black Cray one set to public, but I can, and Tidal doesn't seem to have any idea whatsoever that it is not my song. The Charlie one, it detected right away, as I suppose you could expect. I can't share it, I can't set it to public, but I can still listen to it and add it to my playlists. This way to go about local files is a little bit sketchy, and I believe the terms of service does specifically say you're not supposed to upload anyone else's work whatsoever, but whether or not they'll actually do anything about it is probably a different conversation entirely. And it does seem like they could remove it at any time for any reason though, so that does seem like a little bit of a hassle. However, you can do it all right from your phone, which is better than Spotify and Apple Music can say in that regard. However, you can't upload a whole album or discography all at once. You have to do every song manually, song by song, and you have to manually fix all of the metadata, including an album cover, album name, so on and so forth, which is very tedious if you're a perfectionist about that sort of thing. I was gonna give Tidal a 2 out of 5 for catalogs since it didn't have a local files feature, but upon using this, testing it out, I don't really think there's any problems with using it like local files other than a bit of tedium, so we'll go with a cautiously optimistic 3 out of 5 on it. Tidal's payout is another area where it excels. It is sitting at about $6.80 per 1,000 streams on average, which puts it well above most of the mainstream options. And with it being a well-integrated and well-known part of their appeal, I can't see that ever changing like it might with Amazon Music. It's a respectable amount and above most, so I will give it 4 out of 5. Cost is a tricky one to some extent with Tidal because their prices have recently changed, but oddly enough, it seems like it's actually just improved now, if anything. The best sound quality used to come at an additional fee, but now it's actually all of the sound quality levels at $10.99 standard per month. There are family plans and a student discount, however not a duo subscription, and oddly not even an annual subscription discount, which is odd because they used to have one. When signing up, you also have to be a bit careful with what you're actually signing up for because there is a DJ tool option, which costs an additional $9 a month. We'll talk about that a little bit later on, but unless you're a DJ, you do not need that, so that will be just $9 down the drain if you accidentally sign up for it. Just make sure to be careful not to. If pricing was a little bit clearer to sign up for and they had more discounts, I would give it the full 5 out of 5 because the standard $10.99 for higher audio quality is still very good. So we'll go with a 4 on it. I just wish it had at least the annual plan like like it used to. For bonus, I wasn't sure if I wanted to mention this here or in the features section, but I ended up putting it here because it is well outside the general function of a streaming app. And that's that DJ Tool extension that I just got done talking about in pricing. I'm personally totally inexperienced in that realm. I've never done anything of that sort, but it does seem like it can be a game changer for people who DJ, and I am really appreciative to see any streaming service giving a tool, or at least the option to pay for the tool, that could be a big help. Even if it costs extra, I gotta respect it, so we'll give them one additional point there. Overall, of anything in the video so far, Tidal is the only one that had me asking if I want to fully switch over to it from Apple Music. Its biggest strong suits have some slight caveats, such as the local files not being a thing, but the upload function being a thing, and certain times having the audio quality not being functional to its highest extent, such as with more obscure songs or with Bluetooth audio. But as a whole, if you're going to take a streaming service and plug it into a hi-fi system, Tidal is probably the one that you want to do that with. It has everything you need and a little bit more. In my testing, it is very smooth, very seamless, and adding everything up to your library is great. The whole app seems to work very good. There is a part of me that feels like it isn't quite there yet, as much as it could be eventually in the future. But if it did get there, it could be easily the best of the popular streaming apps. It's coming in at 25 points though, which matches it with YouTube Music, and I feel like these are kind of the yin and the yang of what they're actually good for. YouTube Music is particularly excellent for people who want some convenience as well as great suggestions, but not very good for sound quality, whereas Tidal is very specifically good for sound quality and just a premium feel all around. But with that all out of the way, let's move on to the next one, SoundCloud. We're now moving into a tricky territory of things where these apps weren't exactly ever on the top of the world, but they used to be much more well used and were some people's main driver in things, and now have pretty much fallen off. It's really just this one and the next one, but SoundCloud was something that people used as their main driver for a lot of the years that it was at its peak, and it's something that I think at least a lot of people still go on today, but more people definitely used to at least pop onto occasionally. SoundCloud is something that came about as almost just as much of a social media platform as it was a streaming app. In some ways you could liken it a little bit towards MySpace or something like that, but it was more focused on that streaming side, and the main thing you always have done on it is listen to music. But that developed things like the 2010 SoundCloud rap subculture, and it's something you kind of had to be there for in a way as well. In recent years, however, they have tailored things more in the direction of trying to compete with platforms like Spotify and be a subscription-based streaming service where you can stream anything you want rather than just user-uploaded content. This has led them to a few subscription tiers, one being called Go and one being called Go Plus, the former of the two being around for much longer. Go allows you to download songs for offline play as well as not be served any ads. However, Go Plus opens up a wider catalog of much more commercial artists, doesn't have ads, and acts pretty similarly to all of these streaming apps we'll talk about today. That tier is clearly the most equivalent to everything else in this video, so just assume that that is the subscription we're talking about and the version of the app we're talking about. That out of the way, let's get into it with UI. Outside of very occasionally going on it, and a lot of the time that just being something that someone sent over to me to listen to, I haven't really gone on SoundCloud in years, so it was somewhat refreshing, but also just surprising in general to see that it just hasn't changed much in the years that I've been off it. In a sort of back in my day type of way, that sounds kind of nice, kind of wholesome, but in practice that just means that it's quite behind the times, really. Starting with the homepage, there's a lot less options than something like Spotify or your other mainstream apps, but it does somehow feel more cluttered in a way. There's not a lot of rhyme or reason, it's all very colorful, there's just sort of an obnoxious look to SoundCloud. Even the search tab insists upon being more of an art gallery than a functional tool. The library tab is just fine though, all well and good there. And then once actually playing music and using the player, you'll probably fall into one of two camps. Group A being hit with a wave of nostalgia, Group B throwing up in their mouth a little bit. You actually swipe left or right on the screen to go to the next or previous song to skip to it. Think of like Tinder, but instead it's a song. And then you have to drag across manually on the actual sound wave bar to get to a specific point in the song. The full album cover is never actually viewable. It just kind of scrolls along as you listen to the song, and as you do, you'll see the thoughts, prayers, and emojis from other random users who have left them. You'll immediately pick up on what I meant, where in some ways this is more of a social media platform than a music player. In a way, it's nice that they've stuck to their guns and kept what's most unique about this platform. In another way, it ends up being extremely cluttered and clunky. I feel like it would be very nice if they gave you the option to turn on a more traditional player. Have this be the default, and then, maybe make an option where we can get something that just looks like any other player. Having it feel more clear on how to read comments than to, say, skip a song doesn't exactly feel like it's with the times. You can turn off those comments as well, but you can't turn off the emojis. God knows why. And the entire social media upload whatever you want sort of thing gets in the way a little bit when actually looking for songs or adding things to playlists as well. It's super common you'll search up an artist and end up finding a fake account either listed second, third, or sometimes even all the way at the top, and getting it mixed up, leading you to add fake versions of songs or just not be able to see all of the songs that an artist should have available. Many popular artists have profiles that aren't even filled up. They don't have profile pictures and such, probably just because this app is so much less used than many of the others, so sometimes an imitator looks more like the real thing than the real thing actually looks. And the functionality of the search feature doesn't do much to help with that. If you're looking for something even slightly more obscure, a simple typo will sometimes throw the entire thing off, and I also end up running into things like covers or instrumentals popping up before the regular version of the song at times. Sometimes re-uploads posted by other users will also pop up first, which in theory isn't really that big of a deal, but it will also mean that a lot of the time it will be more compressed and lower quality than it would be otherwise, and you're not giving any streaming royalties whatsoever to the main artist, instead just to some random person. Artist pages are also much more poorly curated and managed than on other platforms we've talked about before this point. I've noticed that sometimes specifically songs will all be uploaded from an album's tracklist, but it won't be arranged into an actual album itself. What's worst of all, though, in this app's entire functionality is that I got this pop-up when curating my list of followed artists.
It's really pissing me off that I can't find this screenshot now, because I was obviously going to put it up on screen, but essentially what that screenshot said is that I can't follow any more accounts because I followed too many too quickly. They weren't like small accounts either. I'm talking big artists, verified artists. I was following a whole bunch of them in rapid succession because I was just building the library up, and it gave me that pop-up. That's what I'm trying to explain in this portion. I wish I could just show the screenshot, but apparently I don't have it anymore.
This is genuinely offensive. What were they thinking in making this apply to every artist, including their Go Plus catalog? I'm just trying to follow genuinely well-established artists. They're not going to follow me back. The point of it being that is very clear. They don't want you to spam follow a ton of accounts, hoping for a follow back or a message or people to check out your own submitted content. But having this apply to everyone, including people who don't even have anything uploaded, is frankly ridiculous. So I decided to just keep adding people, keep following artists that I had for my list, and they just kicked me off of this function. It was a temporary ban, I believe, but I was banned from using this paid service because I used an aspect of it too much. I'm sorry, but you can't make this shit up. The desktop app is a very weird thing because pretty much nobody actually uses it and just uses the web player instead, if anything at all. I decided to download and try it for the purposes of this video just so we could compare, and it didn't work. I then had to go into manual files and wipe everything, restart everything, try again, and I did finally get it to download. But then once I booted it up, it becomes clear that it is the exact same as the browser app anyways. There's not really any differences whatsoever, so don't waste your time and storage, I guess. The browser app looks and acts pretty much similarly to the mobile app, but it is a bit nicer in this context since it's more spread out. You have a mouse, things are easier to control in general. Running this is pretty easy. I see no real issues with it for all intents and purposes. This is an okay web player. That's obviously all more of a side note though, because why wouldn't you just use YouTube at that point? You're already on a browser. Just go to YouTube and listen to it normally. You're probably going to be using SoundCloud on mobile much more than desktop, and that's where a big problem comes in that this has the worst playback issues by far of anything we've talked about to this point. Stuff doesn't load a lot. If you even think about losing connection, the whole app stops working, and I have it happen a lot where for just a few seconds in the middle of a song, it'll just cut all of the audio out, lag behind, and then start back up. It's not that big of a deal, but it kills the vibes. Any immersion you had going for that moment beforehand is going to be out the window when the song cuts to silence out of nowhere and then just starts playing again. It's rather jarring. Another just side gripe, really, not that big of a deal, is that if you connect to any Bluetooth audio player such as your car, for instance, it doesn't really show you what track number or what album or playlist you're listening to ever. That option on it is just empty every time. If you're used to SoundCloud and you've been using it since its glory days, you're all accustomed to all of its weird little quirks. I could see a lot of this being okay. It might not get in your way that much besides the playback issues, but the intent of this video is more to give you options that are alternatives to the bigger streaming apps and see which one is the best on the basis of general functionality as far as that goes. SoundCloud, not very good in that regard because it just is so much more clunky and ill-functional than the other ones. If you're coming from anywhere else, you're probably going to find SoundCloud to be a major pain in the ass. And for that reason, plus the fact that it cut off my ability to follow people, I can't even afford it a single point in this category. For sound quality, you basically get two options on SoundCloud: piss and diarrhea, but you're gonna have to pay out a lot extra for that liquid gold because it is only included in the highest tier subscription that we've been talking about so far. SoundCloud notoriously compresses the hell out of its user submitted tracks, so anything that you're actually listening to that's just uploaded to the platform is going to sound a lot worse than you're used to it elsewhere. But as they've become more of a real streaming service with that Go Plus option, they've started marketing what they're calling high quality audio. What this means in plain English is that best case scenario, you're going to be listening to something from a major record label uploaded for the purposes of the Go Plus subscription, in which case it will only sound a little bit and maybe noticeably worse than what you're used to. Even if you really squeeze it for everything that it's worth, SoundCloud's audio is subpar to say the least. But if you're into underground music at all, which is one of the primary reasons to even touch this platform, the sound quality can't get much worse than it is. And it's almost offensive that they market it as high quality audio, so for those reasons it's going to get a 0 in this as well. SoundCloud does have some interesting features if you're looking for the sorts of things it provides. It's the closest thing we have in the modern era, and even during its peak to some degree, to something that is both a music player and a social media app. Being able to message other users, comment, like, share things around to people, so on and so forth is pretty nice, and you can build a little bit of a community on here. SoundCloud's community as a whole sort of acts as a unique feature, as do the plethora of underground artists that are only uploading on here. Curated playlists are a little bit lacking on SoundCloud for sure, even things like radios are, so you're not going to get that tailor-made music taste suggestion that you do on most of the other apps. But on the flip side, you have things like their buzzing playlists that they update regularly that show off some new upcoming underground acts based on specific genre that are just user-submitted content exclusively. You're not going to get much as far as suggestions of the artists that you know and love, but if you want to have the weirdest and quirkiest taste out of anybody you know, then SoundCloud is probably the way to do it. SoundCloud does have the little doom scroll option like YouTube does, but unfortunately it doesn't have videos, it's just songs, so you can scroll short form versions of songs, and it doesn't really work very well either, so I can't really give it a lot of extra props, but A for effort in a way. And that's everything positive there is to say about SoundCloud's features, and it certainly doesn't make up for what's missing. Right out the gate, volume normalization is not a thing, and it really should be, considering things are uploaded at different volumes much of the time, especially considering the user-submitted content. I imagine that also makes it harder to implement that, but nonetheless, it really hurts the functionality because you're probably going to have to crank up your volume just to have the next song blow up your eardrums because you had to turn it up too high. Lyrics, something that's becoming more and more common, are nowhere to be found. Some people put them manually into the song's descriptions, but that's the best you're gonna get. And even cross-playing between mobile and desktop is not a thing. Those things do not communicate. SoundCloud is, again, basically the same app it was 10 years ago, so all of the new things that have been added to the other streaming services, it hasn't kept up with. That said, playlist covers are a thing. Dear God, Amazon, please get with the times. If you're using SoundCloud as more of a social media platform, it has some cool things that are very nice and very unique to it. If you're using it as a music player, not so much. You're going to be missing out on a lot. For its unique aspects, I will give it a 2 out of 5, but it hardly lives up to this video's standards in that regard. Catalog is one area where I thought I would be awarding SoundCloud its full 5 points, but even that ends up being a little bit lacking compared to what I hoped for. You do have more or less everything that you can find on any standard platform as they've expanded it, but even then, getting what you're looking for can be really janky, and finding it is just difficult sometimes. But SoundCloud does again have the plus of user-submitted content, much like YouTube does. It used to be a lot more like the Wild West on here. Pretty much everything, copyrighted or not, would be uploaded to SoundCloud, either put there officially by the artist themselves or uploaded unofficially by some random user. Nowadays, it is much stricter on here, and it seems like anything will get taken down for copyright if it can be. Now, the nice thing is, if something isn't normally available on streaming, you probably don't have to worry about this because it probably isn't really in the copyright systems. For example, I can get all of Black Cray's songs because they're either uploaded by him or someone else. Sample clearance also is not as much of a concern on SoundCloud as it is other places, so for that reason, artists can upload things that they can't actually upload anywhere else. But some artists also do seem to just use SoundCloud as an auxiliary source for those sorts of things, and not even upload their main works for one reason or another. And SoundCloud is also pretty low on the list of priorities, meaning that sometimes an artist probably won't be putting their stuff here right away, and labels aren't going to be jumping first here to be putting all of the new music onto SoundCloud. Normally, I'd say do what you did with Tidal and YouTube and upload it if it's missing. But again, things can get taken down for copyright, but what's worse is that you actually can only upload a limited amount of things without having to pay. Think of it essentially like how Google Drive has a limit on how much you can store before you have to pay to get more storage space. This ends up being infinitely worse than something like Apple Music's local files option, where I have uploaded full discographies just fine. But on the other hand, again, there is so much stuff that is only uploaded to SoundCloud that it does offer quite a bit of value in catalog. It's becoming less and less the platform of choice, but many artists still do upload here because it's cheap, quick, and easy. You don't have to go through a distributor of any sort. You can just put your stuff right onto SoundCloud. In some areas, SoundCloud's catalog does lag behind the others, but in other areas, it is unfathomably far beyond it. For that reason, we'll give it a 3 out of 5 to just be generous, since it does land in sort of a middle ground. SoundCloud's payout to artists is pretty abysmal. It is about $3.25 per 1,000 streams on average. Where Spotify gets a 0 for that reason, I do have to offer SoundCloud a little bit more grace, partially just because they're not influencing anything and they're not that big of a company comparatively. Nobody's using SoundCloud as the industry standard metric. It wouldn't make any sense to at this point in time. And because the other nice thing is that sometimes artists can only get paid by SoundCloud, or certain works of theirs can only be monetized on SoundCloud because of those sample royalty things, the fact that it's very easy to upload to, so on and so forth. Things that can't or can't easily go onto major streaming platforms can go onto SoundCloud and be at least minimally monetized, so that is a big plus for it. I'll be super generous and give it a 2 out of 5, even if the rate itself is somewhat inexcusable. Cost is another area where SoundCloud is a bit tricky because you can use it for for free, essentially to the same degree you could once use it before these subscription tiers were even added. Ads are present, but they're relatively inconsequential and unintrusive, all things considered. They will play between songs sometimes. It will be kind of annoying, but you'll get used to it. You'll get around it just fine. The subscription tiers are a little bit bullshit, to be honest, because that lower tier, you're not actually really getting anything for that money. Fun fact to those who don't know, things like this or this already exists, so downloading things isn't really adding any extra convenience, especially considering that SoundCloud's actual player isn't very good. So you can get ad-free downloaded songs just fine if you just want to convert them into files, and then your phone can use a separate media player just fine as well. Now for the Go Plus subscription tier, which is the main one we've been talking to, it is $10.99 a month, and that is the standard price, the lower end where things used to always be, but I'd honestly argue that you're paying for a little bit less with SoundCloud just because some things you might find end up being missing, as well as just the janky functionality of the whole thing, and the lower sound quality as well. Pretty much every major streaming platform can offer higher quality audio to you at this point. If Go Plus was at least a few dollars less than the standard going price, I could offer it a lot more leeway. It does have a student discount, which is nice, but most of them do. It doesn't have a duo plan, family plan, or annual discount though, so it does even feel lacking a bit in that regard. But if you ask me, you're getting everything you need to get out of SoundCloud for the free tier, and it is nice that you can still use something free at all. So for that reason, I gotta give it a 3 out of 5. For the bonus points, I've mentioned podcast integration in some of the other ones, and SoundCloud does have that, but it's so limited in its options. Nobody really uploads here anymore for the most part, so I can't really even offer it an extra point for that. It's again a thing where you might as well use YouTube, but there is a DJ tool much like Tidal had, but it's just included in the regular Go Plus subscription tier. I feel like it's not gonna get anywhere near as much use considering that SoundCloud has subpar audio quality, but it's really nice that it's there, just included in the regular subscription, and it is still a nice tool for people in the music industry to use potentially. So I will offer it 1 bonus point in that regard, but the big bonus point is one that we've kind of already went over, and that is the connectivity of everything, the social features, and the fact that it is a great place to find underground artists. SoundCloud Rap was a very unique phenomena, and there's a lot of big artists and a lot of influential moments in music history that we would not have without this platform, quite possibly. Despite all the negatives I've said about it as a music streaming app, SoundCloud is absolutely a net positive in the music industry, in the general area like this. For that, I will give it those 2 extra points. Overall, all things considered, would I recommend SoundCloud? Actually, yes. Yes, I would. Yes, that's right. I would like to give SoundCloud a glowing recommendation, but not as a streaming app, just as a thing that's installed on your phone. The community, the discovery, those underground artists being featured are all great things. And it's something that just makes SoundCloud naturally worth checking out. However, again, do I recommend using it as your main streaming app? Hell no. I think that the sound quality is subpar enough to where you will notice. I think the features are lacking enough to actually cause it to have less value. I think that the playback issues are pretty insufferable a lot of the time. The Go Plus direction for SoundCloud was probably what they had to do to even stay in the market to any degree, but that doesn't mean that it's really any good or on par at the current state of development it's in. I use this pretty much exclusively ever to just find some interesting stuff. If I can support that artist elsewhere and buy their music, then I probably will. If I can find it on streaming apps, I probably will instead of listening to it on SoundCloud. It's a rare case, but it's something that has come up before, and I have been put on to some pretty cool stuff because of SoundCloud over the years. SoundCloud does hold a special place in my heart. In some ways, it is the Gen Z MySpace, so that much it is pretty cool for, but in the streaming service game, it doesn't really hold its own weight. 12 points, meaning it's one of the worst we'll see. But now let's move on to the next with Pandora. If you're of the millennial or Gen Z ages, you probably remember a time in which Pandora was the next big thing and everyone was using it. But Did you know it's still running to this day? They came onto the scene pretty early on, well before Spotify, and even longer before Spotify was actually everyone's main way of listening to music, and most people who use Spotify ended up using this at some point beforehand. Pandora's main function, however, was never to actually act as a streaming service how we know them today, but rather as just exclusively the simulated radios that we do see on most, if not all, platforms now. When I first had the idea for this video, I thought, why not? We'll just go and try out the old radio app for shits and giggles. But what was really interesting to see is that they have now converted fully away from that radio exclusive model, and they actually offer a streaming service where you can pick specific albums, songs, everything you normally would. So that all said, let's get into how it ranks up among the rest. Moving into it with UIs, apparently all of these are going to now give me something weird and quirky to deal with right at the start. In Pandora's case, I found out that it's not even functional in Canada anymore. I'm not Canadian, so it's fine, but I like to tell my FBI agent that I am, so unfortunately I had to stop doing that for the duration of time I was using Pandora. I find it really funny that it does redirect to SoundCloud of all places, but I guess SiriusXM owns both, so it does make some sense. Then I tried to download the desktop app, and much like SoundCloud, I just couldn't get it to work for whatever reason. But this time around, I couldn't really be bothered to fix it and get everything working for the desktop app, because looking at the screenshots you can see in the Microsoft Store, it is quite clearly also identical to the web player, just like SoundCloud was. I assume it's because they're both owned by the same company and they're taking the same approach. There are likely no differences, but without a lot of hassle, I don't get to find out anyways. Then upon opening the browser version, I saw, well, nothing. I'm pretty sure I temporarily went blind, because not only does Pandora not have a dark mode whatsoever on desktop, it actually didn't even work with my regular dark mode extension. I had to go out and get an entirely new dark mode extension for Pandora specifically, made by a third party, just to avoid burning my retinas out on this thing. This isn't the case on mobile. It's dark mode straight out the gate, thankfully. I'm not really sure why they had such a change of heart between versions, but you'll immediately notice something about both versions, both the desktop and the mobile version. They are very minimal. That's generally due to a lack of things being there. There's just not much when it comes to suggestions or anything like that, but for the purposes of functionality, it technically does work pretty smooth. But the next immediate elephant in the room is, what the hell is a collection? You'll notice first that this is where your recently played section appears, but don't get it twisted. Those things aren't in your collection, they're just on your collection, I guess. And this collection system is essentially another word for a library. It's just Pandora getting a little quirky with it, and it does work a little bit differently as well. It sucks. We'll get into that more with the features section. Otherwise, on desktop, it has the regular tabs, artists, albums, songs, etc. On mobile, it's a drop-down menu. Whenever you're playing a song, playing a radio based on a song, or looking at an album, you can always hit this little plus button and it adds it to your collection. And the artist category being on here is a very funny thing because you can't actually follow an artist outright. There's just no button to do that. You have to follow a song, station, or album from that artist for them to appear there. Normally when starting up a new app, my next step in the process would be to follow that lengthy list of artists, but Pandora doesn't even let me start that process, just like SoundCloud didn't let me finish it. That means right away it's time for me to make my 100 song playlist that I've been making across all platforms, and surprisingly, it actually works pretty smooth and decently on here. Part of it is again just due to how bare bones this entire platform is, but if it works, it works. It's pretty responsive, and I like that about it. However, actually finding the songs that you want to add is a bit trickier sometimes. The way things are arranged on Pandora does get a little bit messy. The first odd thing is that artists who have a collab together will have their own profile much of the time, where both of them are listed rather than it just being on their own profile. Second, much bigger thing, it just seems like often Pandora has no idea what I'm trying to look for. The search algorithm just isn't very good, and it will often give me totally irrelevant results first rather than the thing I'm looking for. Again, not a huge issue if you're only looking at pretty popular things, but it can be a hassle if not. The other issue I ran into is that some songs cannot be added to a playlist. you have to listen to them in a radio, even on your paid subscription. It's more of a features issue, and I will end up mentioning it again later, but it does make playlisting technically harder, so it knocks it down in this category as well. In playback, I never really had issues with skipping, buffering, pausing, anything like that, but I did have one issue I kept running into. That being that once I started playing something on mobile, it would only ever show the first song on my lock screen. That means that at a glance, I could open up my phone and it would say the first song I was listening to is still the one that was playing. Effectively, that means you might think you're listening to an entirely different song than what you're actually listening to. Not great for a platform that prioritizes finding new music. But all things considered, it's not fancy by any stretch, but most of the UI does get the job done due to its bare bones minimalism and general responsiveness. It generally works a little better than I expected, and I'm not sure if it says more about Amazon or Pandora that this feels like the more modern of the two, so I guess I'll give it a 2 out of 5 for UI. Pandora's sound quality is ass, not a lot more or less to it if we're being real. They have a low, regular, or high setting available for you, but what they mean by high is about damn near half of the audio quality Spotify standard gives you right now, let alone Apple Music or Tidal. Just about anybody who cares about music enough to want hi-fi quality for their listening purposes probably already isn't on Pandora though, so I guess it makes sense that they don't offer it. I can't imagine their users are begging for it. Even if their thriving community isn't exactly asking for it, it would be nice to have some more options besides McDonald's speaker system, gas station headphones, and kinda bad but it'll do. It's the worst sound quality of anything in this video. If SoundCloud and YouTube are outclassing you in that regard, there's something seriously wrong. As far as the positive end of features on Pandora go, it plays music. That's about all I can give it. As is the case on SiriusXM's other platform, SoundCloud, the features are so behind the times that it's honestly almost laughable. Except with SoundCloud, you had things like discovering underground artists and unique social features. Here, no such things are present. In fact, discovery tools in general absolutely suck on here. New music is what's featured first, but it's never the newest of the new music, and it's not even tailored to your tastes or preferences in any way. The Trendsetters tab is also kind of ridiculous because it poses them like they're underground artists, but they're already very well established, relatively speaking, with thousands and thousands of fans. The top artist section also is not relevant to your tastes, it's just top in general, I guess. And any other suggestions you get are radio stations. They're still really pushing the radio angle for whatever reason, and I can't imagine why when they've done quite a bit to convert this into an actual streaming platform, or at least tried to make it go in that direction. And again, in pushing that radio angle, some songs, once again, I cannot play outside of playing them as the start to a radio. The fact that they clearly have the rights and ability to play these songs, but do not let you play them individually is the wildest thing that I saw across any of these platforms that we'll talk about today. We've already discussed how the library or collection is somewhat less functional than a lot of the other apps. The inability to follow an individual artist kind of just baffles me, and it's generally more picky about everything than any of the other apps are. Even their thumbs system, where you have a thumbs up or a thumbs down on either side of the skip selection, is kind of lame. You have to stumble upon the song naturally. It doesn't even pop up if you're just going through and listening to songs from an artist. Otherwise, this is one out of only a small handful that does not have playlist covers at all. It has lyrics only on a handful of songs, and it's only listed out rather than synchronized. You do get tags on a lot of songs, however, for whatever that's worth to you. I love me some gangsta rap attitude and classical influences. Pandora's radio function is kind of their main selling point, even to this day it seems, and even that still doesn't really work very great. Most users end up complaining that it plays the same songs repetitively, and in my personal tests, which didn't go real far, but were still a thing. That is absolutely true. I got a lot of repetitive picks. Pandora has nothing new or interesting to offer. It has no unique features, but it is missing a lot of the standard ones. 0 out of 5. For catalog, for starters, Pandora has more or less the same selection as the other main streaming apps, but it may have a little bit less due to just how incredibly low it will now be on the general priorities list for even a major artist. But it'll feel like a lot more is missing than it even is just due to the lacking functionality of their search feature. And once you do find what you're looking for, you sometimes can't even play it on its own, which again, I cannot emphasize highly enough is ridiculous. And Pandora is also one of the few holdouts that have nothing in line with local files or user-submitted content, so if you find something missing, it is only missing. There's no other way to get it on here whatsoever. This is also the only platform where I saw fake things uploaded to an artist's official account sometimes. Believe it or not, Tyler the Creator does not have an album called Tyler Fucks Cows. And with Pandora being near the bottom of the list as far as priorities go, I could see their selection dwindling even more in coming years because at some point, why even bother? So overall, some things may be missing. It doesn't let you add anything of your own, and it doesn't even let me fully use some of what it does include. Again, easy 0. Pandora's payout is one of the worst we'll see, and it is absolutely terrible. It is equal or less than Spotify. Low-key, they probably can't even afford a lot more than that given business isn't exactly booming. Spotify does have 100 times more users currently, but all things considered, that doesn't change that it's not anywhere near enough. And they don't even have the saving grace that SoundCloud did, where supporting underground artists or copyrighted types of material is a thing. That's not on here. There's no user-submitted content. You're pretty much only getting the commercial catalog. I'll give them 1 out of 5 because it seems like it might be slightly above Spotify sometimes, but even that's being damn near excessively generous. I'd never even consider using this permanently due to the payouts alone. For cost, the free version of Pandora does still exist as it once did, and I feel like the people still using it kind of just have the if it ain't broke, don't fix it type of mentality. But that free version doesn't get anywhere near a regular streaming app, so it's not really in the question or conversation today. If you want to use it properly, as we've been discussing, Pandora is $10.99 a month. They offer a student discount, annual subscription discount, family plan, and they're actually the only one to advertise a military discount, which I thought was humorously fitting given the probable age of the users on here. It has all of those options, and it is on the cheaper side of the two ways that it can really go, so on the surface it does look pretty good. However, you are paying for less with Pandora. That is just objectively true. Higher audio quality is physically worth more money if you are to ask me, and that is definitely not an option here. Tidal is sitting right there for the same price with infinitely better audio quality. There may be also a significant chunk of your library that is unplayable. You can't listen to every album or song on Pandora as just an album or a song, but rather just as a radio, which you could just do for free. Normally I'd give Pandora a 4 out of 5 with its price point and discounts, but when you're paying for less, I can't do that. The free options offered by SoundCloud and YouTube are easily better than even the paid version of Pandora, so why even bother paying a dime? If you want to use it for whatever reason though, it is technically on the cheaper side, and it has a free version, so it'll get a 2 out of 5. For bonus, it has podcast integration, but I couldn't find a single thing I've ever heard of, so no extra points there. I almost want to redact another one just because of how bad it is on every other standard, but I guess I won't. Overall, I'm sorry to say, but there is no reason to even use Pandora at all in the big 2025, let alone pay for it. If you want to listen to radios for free with ads, many other platforms can get that done easier for you. And if you want an actual music streaming app, which I assume is why you're here in the first place, almost every other option will be better. If Pandora was cheaper than the others, or it had some unique features, I could give it a little bit more of a pass, but there is simply just nothing here to be offered. Pandora clocks in last by quite a bit at a measly 5 points. If we're being real, they were mostly pity points anyways. Anyways, Next, let's move on to Deezer. Deezer is a French company, and it really only ever blew up over there in the European area, more so than it did here in the North America area, but they have truly always been one of Spotify's biggest competitors, and they were one of the first to actually even be one at all, even if that prominence wasn't so much felt over here. It's kind of one of those names that's always been down the list quite a ways, but it's always really been there as well, which made me very curious to give it a try. Let's see what the French Spotify has to offer. Right out the gate, you're going to notice why I call it the French Spotify, because if you're familiar with Spotify, you're going to notice a ton of similarities. Your main page is heavily populated by curated playlists, artist suggestions, mood-based playlists, and the like. The Explore tab is essentially just a refined version of the same thing again, and the only real quirk with Deezer is that they call your whole library your favorites, but other than that, it's all pretty standard stuff. Your search tab adds more specifics once again. App-created suggestions are a really big thing on here, and actually using that search function to find albums, artists, and songs to add to your library and playlists is really clean and smooth. The experience of using Deezer all around was very nice. I had no playback issues whatsoever with Deezer, other than, I guess, that if you pause a song and then close the app and come back to it, sometimes the song itself will restart. And the desktop app is all the same. If anything, it's more functional because it's all spread out very far and you can get to things more easily and clearly that way. Something about all the wacky fonts and shit like that kind of does strike me as a bit cringe, but other than that, it's perfectly functional. I think there's certain bits of clutter and certain things that don't look quite right, but all around 4 out of 5. Very clean and self-explanatory, intuitive app. Deezer's sound quality is one area where it's lacking a little bit, and it's living up to that Spotify comparison once again because it's pretty much the same scenario. That said, just like Spotify, it'll be absolutely serviceable for most listeners, and it'll sometimes even be a bit better. From what I understand, it's a somewhat recent addition, but they've been marketing what they're calling high fidelity sound. It usually doesn't get much more specific than just saying high fidelity. On their website, it does claim to be lossless, however, and I'm a little bit skeptical of that. And that's just because, to my ears, Tidal, we'll get to Qobuz later, but Qobuz and even Apple Music do just sound better right out the gate, and it also causes the app to buffer a lot more. You will actually get playback issues if you turn this setting on, whereas you normally won't at all. Since they're not very specific with the level of quality or how it works whatsoever, and it does cause other issues, I can't really give them any credit in the hi-fi type of area. You might as well not use it, honestly. And the standard sound quality is fine, but not great, so I'll give it a 3 out of 5 for sound. I could see it being a lot better in the future. Features on Deezer are absolutely plentiful, and it's far beyond what I expected. First of all, they are on par with Spotify and Apple Music with the lyrics functionality and how many songs have lyrics available. Playlist covers are available if you want that, and it is technically clunkier than some of the easier options, but also if you feel like adding extra decoration to your image, it might just technically be better. Collaborative playlists exist, social features in general are all over this and are well integrated for what that's worth. Volume normalization is here, it is a thing, and it works, which is very refreshing after using several that don't have it. And I've already mentioned this, but suggestions, tailored playlists, things being curated to your taste and being shown to you are absolutely plentiful. If that is something that you particularly like about Spotify, you'll also find it here. I also like that on desktop, there's a dedicated section to see what artists you've blocked from your account. It's nice to have this feature at all, considering sometimes otherwise you will get suggestions you don't want from the other apps. Another nice thing is this concerts tab, which shows you some upcoming concerts in your area. It's not the most exhaustive list in the world, but seeing live music is always cool, and it's a great way to support artists, so it's great that it's there. Another thing that's really refreshing to see is that Deezer has rolled out a feature that tags when music is AI generated. This is one area where that Spotify comparison obviously will not hold up at all, and it's something so nice to see. They're the first one who've done it, and I really hope that the other platforms get keen to it and also add this soon. Beyond that, Deezer has this little music quiz section section, which is essentially exactly what it sounds like. It's a fun little mini game where you can identify songs based on hearing them, match them to artists or titles, so on and so forth. Probably not something that you're going to use more often than not, but I think it's fun. It's a cute little idea, and I had a good time with it. It even has leaderboards. You can finally play ranked meat riding. So yeah, nothing missing here whatsoever, and a lot of things unique to it, or at least semi-unique to it, that are absolutely great. So 5 out of 5. Easy. Deezer's built-in catalog somewhat surprised me because I thought with it being something that's much bigger outside the US, I'd find more missing than ended up being missing. Truly, however, it seems like pretty much everybody is distributing to Deezer. And again, that search function works super well, so they're really easy to find on here as well. Just like the biggest platforms out there, you're not going to find much missing whatsoever, but if you do, again, like those bigger ones, you can add what you're missing with a local files feature. It's a bit out of the way. It's called My MP3s. It's a little bit difficult to use and it is only on desktop, but that's really no different than any of the major players. And once you add something, even if it is a little bit cumbersome, it's there for you to use. Now, it is a little bit annoying that I can't add WAV or FLAC files, just MP3s, and I had a little bit of difficulty actually adding my added songs to playlists. That usually works, but sometimes doesn't for whatever reason. So it's not perfect, but having the feature available there is kind of just enough on its own. A lot of them don't have this, as we've already gone over. Because of those quirks, I can only give it a 4 out of 5, but this is still one of the best easily when it comes to catalog. The payout section for Deezer makes me really sad because for a while it seems like they were one of the best. But since those days, not only have better paying services popped up, but Deezer has lowered their payout rates significantly. It's currently paying about $4 per 1,000 streams on average, which is more than Spotify, but not enough more. This downward trend makes me think it will only go down more in the future. So it is a shame, but they will get a 2 out of 5 here. For cost, the French Spotify comparison pops up yet again because it is pretty much the same pricing model. They're still sitting at that $11.99 per month mark for individual users, which honestly should be knocked back down to the $10 if they're not going to have supremely high audio quality. But they do have all the discounts. It's student discount, annual plan, family plan, and even a duos plan. So that's great to see, and I'll be generous and give it a 3 out of 5 because that extra dollar does get you a pretty nice app. Bonus round, again, like Spotify, Deezer does have a decently integrated podcast function. The selection there isn't quite as great though, so I wasn't sure if I wanted to add a point, but the extra features on here, just the extra nice little touches that we've already talked about, such as the music quiz, the concerts tab, so on and so forth, make me fully think that it should get 1 extra point. But the AI feature, in particular, the tagging of AI generated music, makes me add yet another on. There's a lot of great features on Deezer, plain and simple, and some of them are even directly helping artists, so it gets those 2 extra points. Due to the special things that it offers, I really wish that I could give Deezer the most glowing recommendation of the day. Hell, I wish that it was at a point where I wanted to switch to it fully. It's a combination of factors holding it back though. The payouts being as low as they are does not sit right. The local files don't work as well as Apple Music, and that sound quality feature, again, still needs some more fine tuning. Any one of those 3 factors alone, I wouldn't any longer love Deezer enough to fully switch over to it, take that time and effort to do so, but with all 3, it's definitely not an option whatsoever. That said, if you are a Spotify user and you really like how Spotify works, then Deezer is a great option for you because this is easily the closest one to Spotify. You can basically have the same app while getting away from Spotify. Deezer is basically what Spotify looks like in the better timeline. It's at 21 points, which isn't all the way at the top, but it's pretty damn close to it. Moving on to the next, It's time for Napster. If you've been around for quite a while and you've been around the block when it comes to listening to music online, Napster is probably a name that will sound familiar to you. Might even be a name that you hold near and dear because they were one of the first and most popular to do it when it came to music piracy, and one of the biggest to make that a huge stir and controversy as it once was. Naturally though, most of those music downloading and piracy services have long since been shut down though, and Napster is of course one of those. It may come as a surprise then that Napster is actually still up and operating to some capacity today. It's just a lot more legal than it once was because they've turned into an actual streaming service. This is no longer some scary piracy thing, but instead a streaming service just like all the ones we've covered today, and very similar to it in a lot of ways. In a shocking turn of events, they're even one that pays out the most to the artists and makes that a big part of their appeal. It's a wild redemption arc to see, but let's see how it actually works in practice. In UI, both with mobile and desktop, you're going to notice right away that the entire design is very minimal for these apps, and it's less in a nicely organized, just kind of generally clean way like something like Tidal was, and more a very bare bones and it's clearly lacking a lot sort of way like Pandora was. All around though, it's solidly navigable and everything seems right where it should be. It's fairly self-explanatory. The player itself is also just fine, nothing dysfunctional. The one thing that immediately sets off red flags to me though is this watch tab that you find on the desktop app. You would assume that this is some sort of way to browse music videos, maybe interviews, things like that, but if you click on it, you're met with quite a surprise. That surprise is nothing. It's totally pointless. You just click on it and nothing's even there. Maybe it's supposed to work, I don't even know, but if you ask me, it's probably most likely that this was once a feature that worked and now has been pretty much removed, and the implementation of it has been taken away from the mobile version but not the desktop version, although I don't have previous mobile versions to work with. The real problems start when you start adding things to your library, or rather your My Music, and that's when Napster's whole clunky, unresponsive self starts showing. Everything buffers, everything takes its sweet time, which doesn't even really make a lot of sense when we consider that there's a lot less to load, something we'll get to later. That in mind, playlist building is somewhat functional and responsive of the things you can do on here, but I also couldn't even do my main first step of adding artists once again, just like I couldn't on Pandora. That's because despite there being a tab for artists you follow in the My Music tab, there's no way to actually add artists to it, at least at the current point in time. There should be this function available, it's just not there. Kind of like the Watch tab, it's like this app is decaying away. You can like songs just fine and they will show up for you there, but not artists, again. Finding artists is also a pain a lot of the time because it's very poorly moderated. A lot of the time, if two artists have the same name, their work will all just kind of be smashed together on the same page. There are also several artists who have two pages and their music is distributed evenly between the two, but not all on one page whatsoever. I'm not sure why it's like this. It doesn't need to be, it shouldn't, it isn't on any other platform. And then when we finally get to listening to the damn music, it has the worst playback out of anything today, easily. The buffering is crazy frequent. It doesn't autoplay when things normally would, and if you leave the app, like if you physically minimize it, a lot of the times it will just pause, freeze up, stop working. And heaven forbid you want to skip a song, because if you do, the whole thing will probably lose its shit and go completely haywire, start skipping all over the place, nothing will play right. No clue why this happens, but I had it happen to me more than once. That's all referring to my tests of the mobile app though. Surely the desktop app would be much better since it's pretty hard to mess those up and generally you have more processing power to work with, right? Nope, it's unusable. This is the only app today, desktop or mobile considered, that I would consider genuinely unusable. It plays 1 to 5 songs basically perfectly, and then something just happens. The app will freeze, it won't play anything back properly, or it'll just stutter all over the song, just going to various points throughout it. You can't even usually get through an album, let alone a multi-hour session with this desktop app. It's unresponsive, ugly, clunky, and behind the times, and generally not well set up enough to where I wanted to give Napster's UI a 0 straight out the gate before I even listened to any of the music. But with those playback issues in mind, it's one of the easiest 0s we'll see.
I went back on here much later because I wanted to get another screenshot, but it prompted me to renew my subscription because it had expired. Wasn't planning on actually doing it, but I clicked through, and the security check that it gave me just didn't work. I couldn't have resubscribed to this if I wanted to. It just didn't work. The catchba thing wouldn't pop up.
Sound quality is a really tricky one on Napster because just like Deezer, it should be great, but sometimes it doesn't feel like it's meeting that standard. Sometimes it doesn't quite seem like it sounds as good, and it's not very specific with its audio quality. They don't have bit rate specifications of any kind, nothing like that. It just says lossless, and that's all it gives you. And I'm not an expert, so forgive me if I'm wrong, but even when something is lossless, if the source is relatively lacking, then wouldn't it just still not sound good, right? And sometimes I really think that's the case, because I even had like blown out bass being a problem at one point or another. Certain mixes just don't sound quite right, and when Napster is specifically advertising great sound quality, that really doesn't feel like it should be the case. I also haven't had this problem on any of the other ones that advertise their sound quality more specifically, but nonetheless, I think it's technically better than most of the big streaming apps. Maybe. Again, this is really up in the air, and I don't think I'm enough of a nerd to know. We'll go with a 3 out of 5 because to my ears, it is definitely not perfect. So Napster's features. Yeah, there's not a lot to talk about here. No lyrics, which is as to be expected, I suppose. No gapless playback, no loudness normalization. There's definitely not social features, and the list goes on. It's kind of like it's stuck in the time when Napster was originally used as an entirely different sort of service. Suggestions are super minimal, and there's not even functional radios on desktop. You can click Start Track Radio and nothing happens. It works on mobile, but only to an extent. Sometimes it'll tell you it can't give you more songs in this radio at all. Sometimes it just doesn't play, as the app loves to do, of course, and sometimes it'll keep repeating the same song despite the fact that you started a radio. Other times it'll actually also just give you more songs from the same artist as if you were playing their artist page instead. And there's nothing else to talk about. There's nothing special, there's nothing unique. It just has things that don't work as good, or it's just missing things. Again, one of the biggest 0s of the day. Catalog. Slipknot, MGMT, System of a Down, Mac Miller, Joey Valance and Brave, Viagra Boys, Charlie XCX, Journey, Salem, A.G. Cook, 100 Gex, JPEG Mafia, Paris, Texas, Yule, Faye Webster, Blade, Lupe Fiasco, ASAP Rocky, Young Thug, Mavi, Chatpile, Shabazz Palaces, Nails, Mac DeMarco, Shoo Shoo, Black Sabbath, Tim Hecker, Mort Garson, Clipping, Eam Triplin, Deftones, Whitechapel, Cemetery, Skrillex, Phoebe Bridgers, Mount Erie, Death, Ava Max, Aesop Rock, 21 Savage, Earl Sweatshirt, Bob Marley, McKinley Dixon, Deltron 3030, Candlemass, Lil Ugly Mane, and Breakins. That is the list of artists that I found to either not be on Napster at all or just have an extremely lacking quantity of their music, usually with their biggest albums being gone and only some lesser stuff being featured. The fact that Metallica is on here is really funny to me though. They're available, all of their music is, at least at the time that I wrote the script. What's really strange is it seems like a bunch of them used to be as well. If I search up Mac Miller, for example, there's a playlist in remembrance of him, as they phrase it, and on it you can find exactly 0 of his actual solo songs, because none of them exist on the platform. It's only songs he's featured on. I understand the concept of the playlist, but I highly doubt they would have went out of their way to make it if they were only going to put things he's featured on a playlist like this. There's supposedly maybe some sort of way to add your own files onto Napster, if I'm reading things correctly, using a third-party app. I couldn't figure it out very easily, and I started to try to get into this process. I just gave up. I just gave up entirely because it doesn't matter, really. With how much is missing, you might as well just download every song you like and use a built-in player rather than transferring it all on here. For their tagline and slogan being the music service for music fans, you pretty much have to not like music in order to like this one the best, because there's hardly any of it actually on here. I don't know if this is because of their ongoing legal issues, which we will get to momentarily, but the selection is about half of the next worst option. If it's not clear, this makes Napster as an app and as a service a complete non-starter, so it's easily a 0, and it might be the easiest 0. Napster has a big part of its marketing being its payout to artists being exceptionally high, around $20 per 1,000 streams, which we'll get to one on par, but not quite yet, and there is only one that is also miles and miles above what Spotify pays out. On paper, it is a sweet redemption story. This once used to be a company that was somewhat threatening artists' ability to make money off of digital music, and now it is one of the most beneficial towards their actual profits. That is until you consider their ongoing legal dispute with Sony Music that alleges $10 million in unpaid royalties. That is a ludicrously large amount of money, considering the fact that Napster only has about 3 million users, and Sony only owns a fraction of the music that you would see on a streaming app. Allegedly, big allegedly on all of this and everything I say about Napster, of course. But given their history with legal issues in the past, I don't really see why we should take their word. And this does bring into question if they're actually paying anyone at all, or if it was just a lot of the Sony artists, because smaller artists probably just wouldn't even realize if they weren't getting paid by Napster. There are so few users actually on this app that unless you had a pretty huge following, you would never know if people just aren't listening to your music. I doubt that a smaller artist would notice or go out of their way to be like, hey, Napster isn't paying me for some reason. If we take them at their word, Napster is 5 out of 5 for payout. If we do not, they are a 0 out of 5 because they're not paying people. So we'll meet in the middle, hope this gets sorted out, and give them a 3 out of 5. Okay, moving on to cost. If things didn't allegedly feel scammy before, what the hell do we got going on here? So if I go to the desktop version of the site and subscribe, it is $10.99 a month. Perfect, that's on the lower end. However, if I download the mobile app and subscribe from there, it's a whole $3 a month more. From anything I can gather, these are the same subscription. It's just $3 more for no reason on mobile. It also goes without saying, though, that even that $10.99 a month mark is insanely high for what you're getting, given that there is literally about half of the music that you would normally get on a streaming app. It's maybe worth like $5, but even then, I have to wonder why you'd bother. There are annual subscription discounts and family plans. However, I would be pretty careful with that annual subscription because between that lawsuit and the massive lack of music on the platform, this definitely feels like it's on its way out. As if the allegedly scammy pricing wasn't enough, the fact that it's the same price every month for significantly less music is enough to very easily give this a 0. A bonus, I got nothing. Going into this, Napster was probably the one that I was the most curious about overall, because not only is it a pretty funny thing to just exist in general, but on paper it actually sounds pretty good. High quality audio and big artist payouts are two of the biggest things for me, so I was wondering for a second if I'd actually want to switch over to Napster. Turns out that not only are those two things a little bit more lackluster than they sound on the surface, everything else is lacking to an insane degree. I really thought that Pandora would have the lowest easily, but this is actually almost tied up now with Napster only having 6 points. If we really look at it though, at least Pandora has the full catalog or close to it, so honestly it might be a better option. They are the only two where I can't think of a single situation in which I would recommend them. Stay far away. Moving on, we've now covered what is technically the longest standing in the game. Let's now go over the newest contender in the arena. Qobuz has technically been around for quite a while as well, though, with 2007 being when the company was founded. I just think for much of that time, it was either just a music publication or a music publication and music storefront. It seems about 2019 is where it became a full-fledged streaming service, at least here in North America. It's kind of hard for me to know all of this because it is a French company again, but their whole purpose and reason entering in here is to provide some competition with Tidal, because you're going to notice right away high quality audio is also their biggest thing. But as we found out, high quality sound doesn't necessarily mean the app is going to be good, so let's see how Qobuz stacks up. The UI on Qobuz is one of the best. It is clean, it is fancy, it feels premium, it's very responsive, and it's very nice. Your library tab is very nicely arranged, everything feels like it is where it should be. Your homepage shows a lot of information, but I think it's all spread out and arranged in a way where it doesn't feel too overwhelming in any sort of way. There's the magazine tab, which is all of their articles, their editorial types of things. I like that it's confined to its own tab because most people aren't really going to care that much about this sort of thing, but it's nice that it's here too in case you are interested in it. The player is also one of the nicest looking we'll see today. I love how this looks. Again, very premium look to Qobuz. The bar to mark where you're at on the song is just simply superior. I like it a lot. Everything on here feels like it works how it's supposed to. Actually, using the functionality of adding things to your library, building playlists, and so on is pretty functional as well. My only issue is finding what I want to add. It's another search engine that really hates typos. It's to the point where if I type ASAP Rocky with the S instead of the $, it doesn't immediately know what I want. Also, oftentimes the profiles won't be fully occupied and fully fleshed out. They won't have profile pictures a lot of the time, so sometimes it can be really disorienting and confusing to find the right artist. And then oftentimes once you find the right artist and get to that profile, it will have crossover with other songs from people with the same name. It's not very nicely moderated. Features for a song also just won't show. There's not any way to see who's featured. Sometimes the artist pages are very cluttered as well. Sometimes the high-res version of an album will show separately than the regular album, and sometimes clean albums will not specify that in the title, and it'll just show up as another one alongside the regular one. But on the good end there as well, it never stutters. The playback is seamless. It even shows you how much that it's queued up and preloaded for you, and it's nice that it stays way ahead of you. The weird issue I ran into though is that, at least for me, the desktop app messes with Discord calls. Super weird and niche, I know, but I thought I had to mention it. When I started a Discord call with Qobuz playing music in the background, I suddenly couldn't hear anyone and no one could hear me either. The call just went silent. As soon as I closed it, it was fine, working again. Tried it again, I was able to recreate this. It just cuts off Discord calls for some reason. It could just be me though, and it could very well be something that you'll never have to worry about. Otherwise, the feel of the desktop app is very responsive, very nice. It's just like the mobile app in a lot of ways, very similar. Tons of crossover here and everything works great, and I like it. As long as you're not in a Discord call, I guess. Using the app in every other way is great, but the insufferable clunkiness of finding what you want to get to at times is a bit of a rough one. Overall, I gotta give it a 3 for that, just because it's not perfect in every other regard either. It could very easily grow into a 4 with a little bit of moderation. If I had to give anyone the tip-top medal for sound quality, it would easily be Qobuz. In actual bitrate and quality level, it will give you the number itself, just like Amazon Music or Tidal, and also just like those apps, it is limited which songs you can get that actually have that top quality available. Not all of them do, but oddly enough, I think that Qobuz has the highest amount of high quality songs. Every time one has it available, you see this little badge on it. So it's very clear out the gate, but also I just think in using it that this has the most available. If I had to guess, it's because they just take what is given from the distributor and always play it lossless. I think that means that if the original publisher goes through their distributor or on their own, uploads a high quality level file, that then it can be played back lossless and it'll actually just sound as good as it normally would, and they don't have to do anything on their end. I can't imagine that Qobuz is going through and manually approving things as high quality with how obscure some of them get. Even some of the things that are on the wrong artist page will have high res available. And beyond that, to my ears, it just simply sounds the best. Technically, Amazon Music and Tidal should not be any different when they're at their highest quality. Something about Qobuz strikes me the best of the lot. So yeah, I guess all things considered, it is the best one, 5 out of 5. The end of that is totally anecdotal, take it with a grain of salt. Qobuz's features are pretty unique, and a lot of that comes from that magazine tab that we talked about, and the separate branching off places that are sort of related to that. Of course, you can actually read their articles, but it also sort of bleeds into everything else. You'll notice that your main page is usually pretty scant in recommendations that are personalized to you, and it focuses more on what the broader audience is listening to. The new releases section shows you everything that just dropped, and it does seem like it's very actively updated, and the essential discography little tab that pops up is also nice and a good way to get into some classics a lot of the time. And then they have this hand-picked albums of the week section, which I like, and they also give you a rundown of what critics are specifically digging. It's another thing that's there if you like that sort of thing. As for personal recommendations though, it really should be a little bit more. But moving away from suggestions and moving on to the app's actual functionality, Qobuz is shockingly lacking on some of the main features, and it's kind of sad to see. Lyrics aren't a thing at all, as far as I can tell. Google tells me that there's unsynchronized ones somewhere. I can't find that. A volume normalization feature is not here, and it feels borderline necessary because it does feed you varying amounts of loudness across multiple songs to quite a huge extent. Playlist covers are absent too, which it's one of the few, you know, and it's kind of bothersome. The one unique feature that Qobuz offers that I do in concept like a lot is the ability to actually buy the music you're listening to rather than just streaming it. And that way you're able to download them and keep them forever. This is a great thing for supporting artists. This is a great thing for actually owning the media that you consume. The thing is, I just can't get the damn thing to work. On mobile, there isn't even a button for it. On desktop, however, there is, but I can't get it to do anything. It just gives me this pop-up, looks like it's going to work for a brief second, and then it says something went wrong and just blacks out the whole tab. I can't buy anything. It might be a regional thing with processing payments, but then why not make that clear, or why not even just take the option off depending on what country you're in? One nice thing is I do like that you can specifically explore record labels. That can be kind of cool sometimes, but otherwise it's pretty slim pickings as far as unique features for Qobuz. This is another category where it feels like Qobuz just needs a little bit more time to cook in the oven. It's missing a lot of the things that all of the major ones have. If you kind of want to know what's going on in the broader world of music, Qobuz can be nice and some of its features are cool. Otherwise, there's nothing really here for you that's unique to the app itself, so 1 out of 5. Sadly, catalog is not only Qobuz's biggest Achilles heel, but it is one of the worst overall in this regard. When adding things to my library and playlists, I ended up finding 8 artists who have very limited things on the platform. Their whole discography wasn't there, just a few things, and I found 2 that were missing entirely. I assume with this being one of the non-American companies and one of the newer ones at that, there's less communication going on between the labels and the platform itself. With this also being one of the most obscure ones, at least over here in the States, a lot of artists probably just don't know about it as well, so they're not going to go out of their way to put their music on here. And as we already went over, it can sometimes be really hard to find what you're looking for, so you might think more things even farther yet are missing than actually are. I'd be a lot more forgiving to Qobuz just because there are explanations that make sense as to why the catalog is a bit lacking, if not for one thing, and that one thing is that there is no local files or user uploaded content whatsoever once again. With this being a service that you can download music from, again, at least in theory, it really surprises me that you can't go back and upload music back onto it to your library. There is a feature right on the app, however, where you can report that something is missing that you want to listen to, so it looks like they're at least trying to fix how many things are missing from the app. That much is really nice, but it is the only thing saving it from receiving 0 points in this category. Now, much more on the positive end. Qobuz's artist payout is phenomenal. It is the best we'll see today. They're paying out $20 per 1,000 streams on average by the looks of it, which is fantastic. I already mentioned this a few times, but at least in theory, it also has the ability to buy music from artists. That's super nice. That is great for supporting them. However, I can't get it to work. But even though it's not for me, it probably is for others, at least others in other parts of the world. This is an easy 5 out of 5 with or without it though. For Qobuz's cost, I feel conflicted here. So technically speaking and in actual amount, Qobuz is the worst we'll talk about, with $12.99 being the subscription price for a monthly individual subscription. They do have family plans, surprisingly duo plans, annual subscription discounts, and student discounts as well, which is very nice that all of those things are available, but with it being the highest priced, it is still technically still just the highest price in general. It is going to be the worst one financially speaking. The thing that gets me though is that it is only $1 more than Spotify's current price, and that dollar is going a long ways. They're paying out so much more to artists, and that is subjectively worth a lot, but it also has the most superior sound quality of any platform, which is objectively worth a lot. It's the most expensive, so I can't give it more than a 3 out of 5. If it was the regular price, if it was $10.99, this would be a pretty easy no-brainer 5, but we'll go with a 3 on it. We'll give Qobuz 1 bonus point as just sort of a general sentiment, and it is that they are the one that care about the music industry and care about the artist the most, seemingly. They pay the most, they promote independent artists, you see things with big spotlights on them that are relatively small projects. The service may be mixed as a whole, but one of its biggest things that is a plus is just that they actually seem to care a lot more than the other brands. Overall, I care a lot about how much artists get paid by streaming services, so I thought if I switch anywhere, it will probably be Qobuz. Sadly, I will not be switching to Qobuz. This has the bones of what is by far the best streaming service, however, it's just not done cooking. The app runs great, it feels nice in general, but it's also cluttered and unmoderated in some other ways. The special features that it does have are cool, but it's also lacking so many of the regular features that all of the main apps have. I know people really care about the personalized recommendations a lot of the time too, and that's completely non-existent. I'm gonna keep a close eye on Qobuz though, maybe try it again in a year or so, and if things improve in the categories where I've marked it as lacking, I will switch over here from Apple Music. It's not really in the cards until local files are a thing, but maybe one day. It lands around the middle at 19 points, but with a little time to cook, it could be like 30. Anyways, let's move on to the final service. So before we close the video out, I feel like Bandcamp needs a mention just because a lot of the time on my Spotify videos that I've done, it gets a lot of people talking about it in the comments section, and it is also just a notable player in the music industry generally. But there is a reason that I don't tend to mention it very much when talking about streaming service options, and that's that it isn't a streaming service. It is a digital music storefront first and foremost if you're using it as intended. It would score really low on cost because you're meant to be buying everything you listen to on Bandcamp. It would also score really low on selection because most major labels don't go out of their way to post music on here. In that regard, it's really complicated though because so much of what's on Bandcamp is only on Bandcamp, much like SoundCloud in that way. But so many of your favorites probably aren't on here at all. It's great for artist payout because you have to buy their music again in order to actually listen to it and keep it. It also has great merch integration where you can buy physical versions as well as just general band merch of all sorts right on the app. And I think these suggestions and recommendations, general features like that are great as well, but they aren't in any way tailored to you. You can select genres you like, but that's about as far as that goes. Past that, it will just recommend you some stuff. And it has recommended me some really cool shit over the years that I'm very glad I ended up listening to, but that's not what a lot of people are going to be looking for. But the app itself is also really clunky to navigate and use. Making playlists is probably the closest thing it has to a special feature. So yeah, I love Bandcamp. I recommend downloading it, I recommend using it, I recommend supporting artists on it and using it to discover some new and cool stuff. But it isn't in the streaming service conversation. The amount of times I've actually streamed something directly from the Bandcamp app is very limited because you can download everything you buy, so I pretty much just go and put them on my local files right away and work from there. It's fantastic, it's a great tool, it's something very nice for artist payout, but at the end of the day, it's just not a streaming service, sorry. So, what did we learn today? Well, for starters, here's our scoreboard, but really these scores are just for one super quick and easy overall opinion. It might not very well actually show your specific needs, which is why we've broken everything down into categories like this, so that you can see how it ranks in all of those. For example, personally, I won't be moving away from Apple Music, even though it is not the highest one today. Of the top two, YouTube Music is the best if you care about selection and accessibility, general things like that, and Tidal is the best if you care about sound quality specifically. All of its other functionality also works great. Qobuz is equal in sound quality, if not better, for example. However, it makes me lower it just based on other factors. For me, Apple Music is still the best just because it is good in all factors, and I really like how the local files feature works. Local files and playlist covers are my two big things, and it has them both and does them both very well. However, again, I think if you want to break away specifically from Spotify and move to something similar, Deezer is your option. It's honestly just Spotify with extra features and in some ways even extra polish. So if it had better artist payout, I would happily switch over to it, honestly. Qobuz, if you don't care about the aspects that I tend to care about quite a lot that I already mentioned multiple times, is another that might just very well be your best option. And Spotify also isn't even close to the worst option, which is kind of crazy when considering the point of this conversation is to move away from Spotify. I would love everyone to move away from Spotify, but I wouldn't be comfortable recommending Amazon Music to anyone just due to how clunky the app is, and I wouldn't be comfortable recommending the three below it to anyone just because they're terrible. I hate Spotify, but if somebody tells you to use Napster or Pandora, to be honest, that person is not to be trusted. My personal setup is still Apple Music with SoundCloud and Bandcamp as auxiliary sources for things that aren't available on Apple Music. I also have YouTube Music at the ready though, because sometimes it's nice to listen to things that aren't on my local files yet, and I'm already part of a family plan to get ad-free YouTube, so it's just there and ready to go. If I were to get some more extra cash on hand, I'd absolutely keep either Tidal or Qobuz, just because I do like that it has that boosted sound quality a lot, but for now that's not really in the cards. But really all this proves is that there are better options out there than Spotify, and that's not just for their business practices and morals. There's better ones just in general. Better value, better features, better sound quality, better things overall from some of the top apps we went over today. Spotify is a solid baseline to mark all of the things that you generally need, but when things are out there that cost less and have more value, why not use them? Now that you have the full detail of it, I think it should be pretty clear that switching away from Spotify just isn't a bad idea at all for whatever your reasons may be. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. I would love to hear from you down there. I apologize this video took me so long to get around to. It's kind of been in development hell, if you want to call it that. This took a lot to research, a lot to script, and then recording it went poorly very many times at this point. And if you look at how long the video runs, yeah, just think of that unedited. It's a lot. So if you did get some good information out of this, I would greatly appreciate it if you could subscribe to the channel, and you can turn notifications on for more music related content. Make sure to also drop a like on the video. It really helps us a lot here, and I will see you in the next video.